Good evening. The board has just returned from executive session. Today is Wednesday, January 4th. And let's all stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, and indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda as stated tonight? A second? Second. All in favor? Great. And Carmen, we have nobody signed up for audience comments on non-agenda items. Okay. Right, we're moving on to our consent agenda. Does anyone have anything to pull from the consent agenda?
Like the full fiscal. Wait,
Fiscal 4.4?
Yeah.
Okay. And which part?
So the wireless microphones and projector. Right, sorry. So for the wireless microphones and projector, I just have some questions that we tried to answer earlier and don't have them all. So essentially the projector that we're looking at is a large venue projector. But the native resolution on it is HD. I believe it was 1920 by not 1080, but it was like 1920 by 1200. So a little higher than HD with some interpolation for 4K. I really think that, you know, unless there is a huge cost differential, we really should be looking at a 4K projector because the lens cost is going to be the same. You need the same lens, whether it's HD or 4K. But looking at the specs of what we've asked for, I really think that, you know, you're going to go to Best Buy, you're not going to buy a TV in HD, you're going to buy a TV in 4K. If this projector is going to last us 10 years, which a laser throw should last us, what, 20,000 hours, average like 5 hours of usage a day, should last us about 10 years before we have to buy a new one. We're going to be using 4K content. And when you have a screen that size, that's really important. The other thing I didn't see in this, I didn't see a proposal for the screen itself. I don't know if we're doing a motorized screen, if we have an existing screen, but that's also going to be very important, especially if you have 4K projection. You have to have a good screen for that. And then for the wireless mics, I think it looked good, the wireless mics, it was UHF, but it's middle of the road equipment, like Sennheiser is pretty good. But why aren't we looking at something like Shure, which is a much higher quality piece of equipment? And also the cost of the microphones just seems really, like the fact the microphones are 15 grand more than the projector is a concern to me. It might be labor if that's the case, but it's just the place antennas. So I'm not, especially since everything's wireless. So I'm just trying to understand. Yeah, I want to get more detail before I could vote for this because just from a technical standpoint, I just have a lot of questions about it. I could be doing that.
That's fine, you know, we can table these. Obviously, we will be delayed a little bit more, but that's okay. We want to do it right. The one thing I can tell you is this was the only response to our RFP. I'm going to talk to Claire. Maybe we can call you because honestly, I know nothing about this technology. You know, that's not my. So, sure, if you think that this is not the right one and you know about it, I prefer that the board to table it and wait a little bit, and then maybe tomorrow or Friday we have a conference call with Claire and maybe the company, and decide, because definitely I don't want to spend $30,000 and know that in 3 years
That's my
it's obsolete.
Yeah, but it might be that the projector is so much more that maybe Claire made the decision that just from a cost benefit standpoint, this was okay. So I just need to have those questions answered. I don't want to delay things, But at the same time, I want to make sure we're looking for the long term and getting the right equipment for the long term.
And that's what I'm saying, we can do it tomorrow afternoon or Friday like that. I just spoke with Claire and she's fine. She's back at work.
Okay,
So I'll just send her an email and say, let's try to get a.
well, let's get SKK in too, let's have the conversation with everybody, because for them, it's just swapping out the equipment, right? It's
But
not,
that's what I'm
I'm
saying.
not
Why
talking
don't,
about labor. Day.
why don't we start the three of us?
Yeah,
Like that, Claire might have a good reason why she decided on this equipment that I really don't know.
Yeah.
So maybe,
Is there a budget, is there a budget she's working within? Like, does she have budgetary constraints?
yes.
So I don't know, I don't see a number on there. Did she
well, let's
just?
not put that out there because SKK might be listening and I think we need to negotiate.
Not, so the number is not on it?
The number is-
Well, this budget, hold on.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can
this
tell
is-
you, the number is 35,650 for the projector. 49,144 for the furnish and installation of 20 wireless Sennheiser EWD mics.
Right, and my concern is like how much of that wireless mic is equipment and how much is labor? Because you're talking about putting in a wireless transmitter, so the only thing you really have to wire to is the speaker system. So unless we don't have wires for the speaker system, you're talking about plugging in four wires.
Definitely we need Claire.
Yeah,
So let's start the two of us. If you still feel that we need to go to the company, let's go to the company. But again, we did an RFP and they were the only ones that answered. America, it seems that the difference between one and the other one was hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we are paying this with leftover money because it was never part of the
Enrique, I've been asking for this for,
no.
and we said we had $150,000 originally to do this. That was what the number we originally threw out.
But because we had money left over.
Yeah.
But in the original capital project, we
It was
never
left
put
out.
money.
Right,
But that's what I'm
that's my
saying.
mistake.
But that's what I'm saying. We have money concerns,
Mm.
but again, if you tell me this is going to last 3 years and for $100,000, it's going to last 50
Longer.
years, then we put it for next year. And
Well, it won't, like the lens itself will last the same amount of time. It's whether we have quality video,
I
right?
understand.
And whether we
I
have quality audio. So it's a quality thing, it's not.
And I'm agreeing with you.
We could on this auditorium, right? We gotta have the sound and the lighting and.
I totally agree with you. Totally agree.
Does it
So,
make sense to approve this? And then, because Claire may say, I already did all that, and now we're gonna hold her up for 2 weeks?
What happens if we approve it? And
Well, what if we approve it and then it's not the right thing?
Well, then we can change it. We can
But are
change it.
we approving the overall spend or are we approving the very specific?
no, we're actually approving the bid.
Yeah,
Oh,
I just don't wanna
okay.
hold her up for 2 weeks. If she comes, because she may say tomorrow, this is the best I could get, and now we hold her up for another 2 weeks. I really don't wanna do that, especially knowing.
I don't wanna vote for something. that might not be the right decision.
This is my recommendation. If the rest of the board is okay, we just need, if Claire needs to talk to Cory. And they agree that this is the best, then what we can do is go back to the company and say, Cory wanted we wanted to research a little bit more. We agree that this is what we want. We didn't approve it the last board meeting, we'll approve it the next one, but let's start moving. If it's not what Cory wants, then I prefer to wait because if Corey might know more than anyone else here about this, and if he's telling me this is not the right thing, there's no reason for me to go ahead with this. If the expert, because I'm not an expert, I've never seen it, is telling me this is not the right thing. So my recommendation is let's table it. And if after our conversation happens, we tell the company, we'll approve it in 2 weeks.
We can move forward without,
Yeah.
okay, I mean,
And this company has been here, and we have paid him hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's, they are basically our sound and light company in the district, so.
Okay, thank you.
So we can. That's the only item that's removed from the consent agenda. Anybody have anything else in the consent agenda? Okay, so we can vote to approve the consent agenda less fiscal 4.4, but how do you do just that piece of fiscal?
You would approve everything with the exception of awarding bid number 2 with the 4.4, because you want to approve
right.
everything else. in the
We can,
you couldn't do that, we couldn't do that, right?
You can pull out a specific item.
we can't pull a specific item off of.
Yeah, because if you don't approve 4.4, you know.
Okay.
Well, can.
I remember
we can vote on the individual
specifically.
file attachments, thanks, right?
What happened?
We can, rather than having to vote on 4.4 in the whole, we can vote on each individual line item within 4.4.
So can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda less fiscal 4.4? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Can I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report, September and October 2022? Second, all in favor? Can I have a motion to approve the BOE memo? A second, all in favor? And can I have a motion to approve the appropriation and revenue status report for September of 22? Second, all in favor? And lastly, the appropriation and revenue status report for October 22. Can I have a motion to approve? Second, all in favor? Okay, so that just leaves out our bid number 2 from SKK Designs, which we will come back to. Moving along. That's it. That takes us to our pre-K update.
Yes, I'm going to have Margaret give us a brief update. We received word, as Enrique presented, before the new year, that we're anticipating additional pre-K funds from the state. The question that we've been seeking is what those funds are for. Those funds to continue at the current rate of around $5,200 a student, or those funds to increase the rate beyond $5,200. The board might remember back in the fall, you passed a series of resolutions to support NISBA advocating to have a differentiated pre-K funding formula for districts in different parts of the state that have higher cost of living, so on and so forth. Right now, the state formula is universal for all districts throughout New York State. We have been advocating for a while to have a differentiated per pupil allotment to account for different cost of living updates. So want to give Margaret an opportunity to give an update, and then we'll put a timeline together.
Okay, so everything. Everything Joe said is accurate. A few weeks ago in one of Enrique's presentations, he showed a number that is in the preliminary budget for the coming year. That is the exact amount of money we received last year from the state and the federal. There's 2 streaming funds for UPK, or at least there were last year. I called around, I called upstate to OEL, the Office of Early Learning. No one knows anything yet. If you look at all of the governor and NICED's budget information online, they all say that they're putting more money towards this year, but no one's put a dollar to that number yet. So we're a little bit in limbo as that goes. Again, as Joe said, the per pupil reimbursement is $5,400. We're hoping that goes up. They're probably hoping they give us more seats. So it's a little bit of, in the meantime, you know, we receive at least 3 to 5 phone calls and emails a day with parents asking us if there is a pre-K program next year. Obviously, those of us that have pre-K students would like to have a spot. If they all recognize that the district will still do a lottery, but they're trying to hedge their bets. So are the local nursery schools asking what we're doing because they need to know whether or not, what do they plan for themselves. So, you know, we're right now in a little state of waiting. We can definitely, if we use the same money, we can show you what it might look like at next year's board meeting. If we find out something new between now and then, we can adjust that. But the process, if we were to go again, starts from the beginning. So we have to put out a request for proposal and let the local agencies speak to us about whether or not they'd like to partner with us, et cetera, before we even get to putting out an opportunity for parents to apply and then become part of a lottery. So there's a lot of steps that have to happen, not the least of which is all of you determining what the next move is.
Do we, real quick, the program that's happening off-site right now, is that as successful as the one we have internally? Are they using all the seats that are allotted? And if they aren't using all the seats there, where does that money go? Is it just lost?
The money stays on the table, even if we couldn't fill all of our seats. The money goes back to whoever gave it to us. We can't roll it forward if that's what we're thinking. What's the measure of success if we look at their program versus ours? Enrollment is the measure.
We'll call it enrollment. Are they full?
They're not full, and they weren't full from the beginning. Yes.
So we're only utilizing, they're only getting paid based on the number of students that are there.
Right.
And
So-
the rest of the money we lost, it went back to the state.
Exactly. And if a student, let's say tomorrow, I get a phone call that a student dropped out and went to a different setting or moved out of the district, that immediately stops that streaming fund for them, for that student. So we keep in touch with each other. We know what their roster looks like, et cetera. And that's how they're reimbursed every month.
Have we had any students disenroll from our in-house program?
I think we have. We lost a student that I believe moved out of the district. They did as well. So yes, I couldn't exactly tell you
No,
that
that's
off the
okay.
top of my head, but yes,
And did we lose students at the outside program?
yes. And we've added. So when a student drops,
Yeah.
I go back to the wait list and I call and say, we have an opening at wherever the opening is. Would you like to participate? And the parents make a decision. We lost a student at Frank G. And we offered it to the next parent on the waiting list and they accepted and just enrolled their child to start Tuesday.
You said the off-site location wasn't full from the start, or then how is there a waiting list? Wouldn't they have gone to the off-site location?
They have a choice of either one.
So they didn't
at-
want to go to the
At that
off-site.
point, no one wanted, right.
And then,
For some people, imagine there are transportation issues because we don't bus. So for some folks, we had a parent drop because they just couldn't get them there and pick them up every day. It was just a little too far.
so could we expand the RFPs to neighboring districts?
It goes to everyone within our geographic boundary.
And you can't file a variance for that,
To do what?
to go outside of
That would
the,
make it harder because they have to get them there.
I was just thinking to get as many seats as possible, so there is no waiting list.
Well, remember that to our south, Program partners with their local folks. To our north, Peak Skill partners with their local folks. I'm not sure what Lakeland's outreach is. I know they have a very robust in-house program. So, and also, we talked a lot about this last year. There are tremendous hoops for a collaborator to jump through, to be approved, to be a partner in this process. Most of the nursery schools don't want anything to do with it.
I have another question. So refresh my memory and maybe the other trustees. If you put out the RFP and you hear back from nobody can do it, right? We know that there's somebody, but nobody participates and there's no other provider. What happens? We still move on with whatever we choose to do in.
Right, yeah. So if no one steps forward, then you just simply say to the state, we put out the RFP, here are the dates, no one responded.
Yeah.
And they say, okay, fine. We still do what we would normally do. So let's say that we're going to continue with 2 sections, then we continue with the 2 sections, but then obviously we only have 34 seats.
But that money can't be used in-house. It has to, it either goes to them or goes away.
So if you have what we have times 5,400, that's your allocation. You can always open another class, that's entirely.
But with that money,
So for every student that you take in, you're reimbursed $5,400 up to the maximum amount of 300 and whatever the number was, 54. That's it, that's your,
And that $5,400 covers the whole program?
of course not. That's what we've been saying.
It comes out of the general.
That's why we've been advocating.
I just want to finish real quick.
The answer to your question, I think that I'm not sure you're getting,
Yeah,
the money is for a seat.
Mhm.
The seat can be in-house or external.
Yes.
They don't give you X dollars for in and Y for
it
out.
wasn't
They
a
give you,
moment in time that it was that way.
No,
It was.
never.
10% holdback.
Right, that's right. You have to give, so we are required to give a collaborator a minimum of 10%. So we could have said to our collaborator, we're only giving you 3 seats. But why would we do that? We don't get that money, even if we
Right.
don't give them more. So of course, I said, how many children can you take? And she gave me a number and that's what we worked from. But if we had, let's pretend we had 4 sections. Then I could turn around and say, if you're gonna be the collaborator, I'm only gonna give you the minimum.
Got it.
Because I can take the rest of my kids in-house. Yeah.
Right.
So as we're looking at the increased aid, and if it really is for more seats, are you considering opening up a 3rd section in-house next year?
Well, I will tell you that the district would love to do that. I mean, the teachers would love to do that at Frank G. But that decision is not ours to make.
We would come back to see what
Right.
the local general budget share would be. We would have to
So-
put that budget together, and that's why we're starting with is what is the per pupil expense? Because if it's 5,400 a kid, we cannot fund an entire classroom 17 at 5,400.
I wonder what it costs us per student for UPK and what it costs the nursery school per student.
Well, I can't tell you her budget because
Well, I'm just saying, she wouldn't take students if she's not gonna make money. She's
No,
not
they-
gonna lose money. What's
I
her
would say she
benefit?
probably comes close to breaking even on this.
Okay, so
And
she's,
but that is also why a lot of people don't step up.
right, so she's,
The
she's breaking
$400
even.
is not close to their.
In the school district, it's gonna cost us money.
It does cost us some money and we can show you what that cost is. And that's why the districts, especially in southern New York, have been advocating for a higher per pupil reimbursement.
so I've been asking for, since I've been on board, for the cost of UPK. We were originally sold that it was a budget neutral proposition, which is not the case. We know that. So I would respectfully request sooner than later, because we can't have a conversation on hypotheticals. I think the idea of building the plane while it flies is over. It was the first time we did it, we didn't know, but now we know. The first year has come and gone. We're involved with UPK. I would like to know what our expense is for UPK and how much of our general fund, because I'm figuring that it's somewhere over $100,000 a year is what we're spending out of our general fund, and it's probably a bit more than that when you start adding in the academic, the educational supplies, not the one-time purchase of tables, but just the cost of the two TAs. We didn't get to share TAs because naturally we hired a lot of TAs this year, right? So we didn't have extra that we just didn't use. We've added to the roster of our TAMA members. So the cost of UPK is a bit more than we had initially voted on. It was voted on as a budget neutral proposition, which isn't the case. So what I'd like to get from the administration, please, will be the cost of UPK. And what I'd like to get through December is what we didn't receive from the 34 students. So we mentioned like a student leaves, a student comes. Well, there's a delta in terms of time from the last day of the student who leaves and the start of the next student. Our expenses stay fixed in terms of salary, but if a student leaves on November 5th, are we getting paid for the month of November? Or are we getting paid for 5 days worth of income for that particular student sitting in that particular seat? The next student starts December 1st. We've lost that. I don't know if they use 30 days of the month, if they use an average, if they use the actual school days. So I'd like to understand how much money we're actually receiving, because we can't say that it's even going to just cost $5,200 a seat or receive $5,200 a seat, because if a kid leaves and then another kid comes back and there's a gap, and are we getting paid for the gap or no? Is it just the first of the month, you get the whole money, and if they leave on the second, you're good, and as long as you fill it? So I think those are important things to understand so that we can decide. Yeah. And we should know that now because we're getting them reimbursed from the state, right?
I think the taxpayers, it would also be helpful if the taxpayers could see what it costs the district to have it in-house per student, and asking the provider what it costs her. Because you're saying you don't really know. She obviously must break even, or else she wouldn't be a provider. But I would really like the actual number from her so the public can see the difference.
Well, I do think they're
Get that.
I would say that if I was a good son.
They can,
Why would I give you
they're
more
also
budget?
can trade the opportunity for the right to have pre-K,
Yes.
like school, like.
Well, she could tell you
Consider
if she's
service
breaking.
No,
Because she's charging other people.
she gets that. Yeah, so her RFP says, will you accept $5,200 a kid for taking this kid? She either says yes or no. That's
Okay,
it.
so then we compare the 5,200 for what it's outsourcing it to what it costs in district.
100%, yeah, absolutely. We
It's
can
the
do that.
district cost that we care about.
Yeah, one of our issues, Stephanie, was we had a number, I don't know how many, Margaret, there were 3, 4, maybe potential collaborators. And they dropped because they didn't meet the requirements of the RFP. And that was from teacher certification to space to other
Well,
things.
that's why I was wondering if we would file a variance to go to Austin maybe, and get providers in Austin or Peekskill.
We can research that to see if,
Just-
if we exhaust our geography.
Because Peekskill's not that far. We have residents in the Peekskill school district, are in our school district that live in Peekskill.
Another quick question, if we're, so you have a waiting list, right, from kids that didn't get on last year. As kids are leaving the outside program, can they get a spot in Frank G if there isn't? Or we just,
So we just filled a Frank G, but the problem is that there isn't a vacancy at Frank G.
yeah, but there was, did we go to
Yes.
on the waiting list or someone that left that?
We went to someone on the waiting list, someone who didn't have a spot and offered them a spot.
So parents that left the other program for whatever reason. Didn't get back, they're on their own.
One child, to my remembrance, moved out of the district. Another child did go to a different program. So no, I didn't fall.
So,
I went to
Eric,
the
are you wondering if a parent chooses to leave program A, can they go right in the program B, or do they have to get in the back of the line, which is the wait
Yes.
list? Or when they leave a program, whichever one, they now are, gone goodbye. And if they're not a district resident, that answers that question.
Right.
If they left on their own for whatever reason, your question is, can they join the wait list?
Yes, can the people that leave the outside daycare, so to speak, or the outside, join it back onto our wait list here?
We can certainly look at that for next year, that if you do what you said, if I left the outside program, can I ask to go on the wait list? But I would say that they would go to the end of the wait list, and the chances of them getting a slot at Frank G are very slim. And I've been honest with people about that. We've had people call right up until Thanksgiving.
Right.
To see if there was an opening, and I said, you can send me an application, I'll put your name down, but the chances of something opening are very slim.
I think someone asked for information on attendance and pre-K, I believe that's the highest average daily attendance. And I think looking at that study, there was one child that left, and maybe that's what it was, there was only one term.
Right. Can we find out how many students left the other?
Sure. Yes, I can show you that next time we put the transition.
And do we do an exit interview on them? When people leave, we ask them, like,
I actually met with the two parents, just to ask them what was happening. So I knew that one was leaving the district. I knew the other one was going back to a prior preschool arrangement. I'm not comfortable saying any more about that.
that was in-house or external?
External.
Yeah, I think exit interview would be helpful, so we know what our providers like. And
It's-
What if you have one option for a provider and you just don't care for the provider? What do you do?
As a parent,
No, as administrators.
To the district.
What if you're getting bad
Oh,
feedback, or
So,
what do you do? Because
well, since this is our first year, what we would have to look at is, you know, how satisfied were we with the program that we ran this year
Yeah.
with our collaborator? And, if that, again, we don't know if an RFP went out, if they would agree to collaborate again, and then look at what we discovered as part of the process.
Can we have more than one collaborator?
They were the only people, they were the
No,
only.
can we?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So to me, it makes sense to open the variance up, because it gives people an
Yeah.
opportunity.
And a new
They don't have to
detail.
open it up to seek it. But I'm saying if you have a variance and you're offering people more than one option, and maybe the people that live on one side of the district would be happy to drive to the provider you found to our south, while the people on another end of the district may be happy to drive to the provider here. To me, why would we not want to give our parent the option to have the most convenient opportunity for them if the offering makes no difference for us and we can have as many as want? I can't imagine why we would want to put
So
ourselves in a box.
we'll do that homework. I mean, we ended up, as I said, with the one provider because the others couldn't meet the requirements.
Yeah,
The
in
question-
district.
Right, the question is, if we have an in-house, in-district provider that meets the requirement, can we also go out of district?
Yeah,
That's what I'm hearing. So
Yeah.
we'll find out. And if we don't have an in-house provider, what are the steps we can take to?
And this has nothing to do with the in-house. I don't know anything about the external provider. I'm just thinking we have a pretty
Access.
big district. Right? And there's gonna be a lot of people. And if we're getting money from the state and it's just sitting on the table, it seems unreasonable to me to not offer it and find as many ways to fill seats as possible. Somebody drives to Croton every day and they live in Montrose, they may not want to drive the other direction to get to that program, if they can hit the location on their way to the train station.
Yep.
So we can find that also.
awesome, and so I think what I heard from everybody also is understanding the costs. Especially the in-house part will be really important to make decisions. You know, at some point, I feel like we went through it 1 year, and I know it's like a little aggressive to say it, but we want to like understand so that we can almost know what we're gonna do each year, right? Like with modification, because living on a whim, I don't know about for you, but for me, it's very stressful. So this is year 2, so we get it. But I think the next conversation, a budget will be cost per pupil, whatever you want to call it, would be really helpful. Awesome. All right, moving along to Princeton plan, data and metrics. This was our presentation that was going to happen in December. And we had to push it to January. So we're picking back up where we left off.
So, Craig, you can go to the next one. So, at our last board meeting, the school board president gave an update on various, outreach efforts, information that was ascertained from the public hearing back on December 1st. There was an informal survey at that time, various emails, that the board has received, as well as feedback at different, meet and greets, as well as folks speaking at board meetings. What we wanted to provide for the board today are some of the metrics and data sets that are currently in operation in the district, and to have a discussion over whether or not there's interest in creating or building others, and then lastly, end the discussion with whether or not there's an interest to try to capture the experience of kids, teachers, and families in a different way. So in terms of student achievement, I'll let Margaret take this on slide 3 and 4, getting into different data we collect, teachers, or different data teachers collect on children, and how often, and what those assessments are, and what we use that information for.
So we use iReady, which is an online assessment for ELA and for math. It's a required benchmark from the state in terms of our RTI process. It's done 3 times a year, K through 8. We do use it if necessary as a screener at the high school level as well. We use at the elementary, well, we use this a little bit at middle school also, contest and Pinnell, which is a running record, which means that a teacher is sitting next to your student is reading a book they've not seen before, and the teacher is notating how proficient that child is at reading while they're listening. At the end of the running record, they ask a series of comprehension questions, and the child gets the score. So we do that. We're looking at accuracy, fluency, and comprehension. We do it at least 3 times a year, but much more frequently, especially if we have a student who's struggling. ESGI is just the name of the database where we house the following: letter identification, sound symbol recognition, blending, segmenting, and rhyming. This is all done in K through 2.
Can I just ask one
Absolutely.
question? We get into this before we get into all these metrics, because I know these are all existing metrics.
Yeah.
I think what I'd be interested in hearing is how you expect the Princeton plan to be affecting these metrics. Because the discussion we're having today is what metrics are we using to determine if the Princeton plan is successful? So if we are going to be using these metrics, what do we expect to see in these metrics based on the Princeton plan, and why? That to me is the focus of this discussion, not an explanation of what each of these metrics is. Right?
So let us briefly review them, and then we can answer that question after each chunk.
All right, great, thank you.
You're welcome. HFW, sorry for the jargon, is high frequency words. Those are actually the words that kids see most often in print. Think about things like prepositions and conjunctions. That's assessed and monitored K2 as well. Sometimes 3 times a year, but mostly more often than that. Writing samples. So we have grade level prompts that we use in the beginning and the end of the year. That all kids will write to the same prompt in a class and a grade, I should say, and then they are reviewed and scored by teachers. Math benchmarks are matched to our math curriculum, fall, winter, and late spring. And then Words Their Way, which is the phonics, phonemic awareness, and spelling inventory. There is a fall, winter, spring assessment for this. They are also used in between by teachers to regroup the kids and move on to the next level of learning.
So Margaret, before we go to Lisa and student support, how would we expect our reorganization to impact how students may perform on any number of these?
So I would hope, because we are together now as a grade level, and there are certainly stronger conversations happening at each grade, that we would see an improvement in all of the benchmarking processes. I've been having great conversations with the 3 principals about what they're seeing in classrooms, ways that we can improve. Our grade level leaders, as part of our monthly meetings together, have shared the same sentiment with me, that they feel that they're tighter as a group, that they're sharing more information and more resources with one another. The goal is to have that translate to student achievement.
So, so with that, so it looks like all these metrics that I'm seeing are existing metrics that we
Yes, they
have.
are.
Okay, so we should be able to take historical information, because I think the big challenge we had in metrics discussions was, well, we've never had the Princeton plan before. We don't want to compare apples to oranges. From what I'm hearing here, we can compare apples to apples with historic information based on these metrics. And we can actually look for the end of this year to determine, have scores increased in a statistically different way than we would have expected normally without the Princeton plan.
I think that that's a fair way to view that. Yeah.
Okay,
We don't even have to wait, right? Because we do them through this, we do this 3 times a year, so we can already just take the test you gave this year and compare it.
Well, you gotta give, I mean, you gotta give the principal a little time to,
September and
But I'm saying, you could just look at
you can
where
start.
you are period to period, and then you could look at the end.
Yeah.
And look at what the total change was. Why, again, it's this waiting. Like,
Right.
I feel like you could start to take a look right away and see what's going on.
And the
Because
question is, would you expect to see that impact in the first year? Or would you expect to see that impact in 3 to 4 years? After people have started to cycle through the Princeton plan and grow up through it? Because right now, we probably have an impact of kids who are having trouble with the transition from going from pre-Princeton plan to Princeton plan. So we wouldn't really know if it's really successful until we have a cycle of kids that have only known the Princeton.
well, they're always going
Is
to
that
transition.
fair to say, or is
The
that?
transition's never gonna end, right? They're always gonna be in a transition. Because now
Well-
every other year it will transition. So whether so there was a transition.
Yeah,
Next year,
there
there's
were
gonna
kids-
be another third of the district's gonna transition.
The kids who are new to the Princeton plan this year, right? So all the K kids, that's all they'll know, right? The kids who are in second, third, fourth, and fifth grade, this is the first time they're experiencing this. So until you get that second, third, fourth, and if my math is right, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade cycling through. And once those kindergarten kids make it to fifth grade, that's where we can start really benchmarking.
It should be more regular.
Are there any studies, and I Googled it, look at Google anything, I could probably diagnose myself with diseases that only affect women, but it'll still on me because if I look hard enough, right, my doctor hates when I say, well, I went and I looked on Google. Is there anything that shows that, not anecdotally, but actual scientific data, or however you want to, that shows there are statistically relevant data that shows that there is an actual academic improvement? Because most of what I see, so to my point, you said no, which
I
says,
studied it. We looked for that when we started.
so then why do we think that we have a magic formula here that no one in the United States and all of the billions of dollars spent on education, we're going to be able to capture an improvement through metric measuring, if not a single district in the United States has measured one? And
Well,
figured it out
wait,
so
wait,
far.
wait, let's back that up. We're not saying that they didn't measure it, they just didn't share it publicly. It's quite possible that in a meeting like this one, in a district upstate that just transitioned, that they've had the same conversations we're having, but no one's written a study and published it. So they may know internally, they
It's
may be able
50
to
years
tell
since
you
the
that.
Princeton plan's been introduced, the 70s in Princeton, New Jersey.
I couldn't tell you the exact date, but
Right.
if you look to our.
I mean, I'm not the smartest
Been
guy.
doing it for 40 years, so.
Yeah, we heard during the hearings that people were saying, well, there's scientific evidence that the Princeton plan is going to be detrimental to kids. And I'm going to give you that information. He said, please, and we waited and no one ever gave us.
Well, the
report
study that we
saying
paid
it's
for said it, the study, that 80-page study or 82-page study, it says that transitions, it says it in that study, that transitioning kids, so I don't know who said it, I don't have the study. But
I
the
have the
people-
study.
The people we paid said that you have learning loss through transition and that the every other year model was the least desirable of the recommendations they made because you have learning loss through transition. My question is not about rehashing that yet, right? We'll eventually get there as a board. My question is, which we answered, is there any data that suggests throughout the 50 years or so that the Princeton plan has existed that says that this is an academically superior model? And I have a very hard time believing that if it was superior and not just negligible, right? Because again, the study that we have, the 82 pages, says that the benefit is financial, not academic. So I'm curious why we think there's going to be an academic improvement when there's not a stitch of data in a massive industry in the United States that indicates otherwise. Like we're like trying to reinvent something.
Well, there was also a social benefit for it
I
too.
think-
But none of this is social. This is all, so we're only talking
Right.
academics right now.
There's some social.
No,
right?
but we're gonna get
But we're
there.
talking about academics. I'm just. on top.
Okay, so now the academics page, you're right.
Yeah, okay. Margaret. So I know we changed our math textbook to Eureka Squared. How will that potentially change metrics year over year? Because there's been some transition and difficulties with that transition. So I would anticipate that maybe our math iReady scores have gone down I don't know though. What do you anticipate?
So it'll be interesting to see when we benchmark at the end of January, what that shows us. I think it would, if you talked to the teachers, I think you would be surprised that depending on the grade level, they are seeing improvements already. So there are some grades where I've been hearing, oh no, the kids are doing unbelievably well. We're so pleased with what's happening. They feel confident with the word problems. They can, you know, make sense of this now. A lot of the issues that teachers fed back to Eureka over the years have been addressed in this update. And
Okay,
in
I'm
those
just wondering what it
instances,
does for the data. We're trying to compare.
We'll find out.
Year over year.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll find out. When we do iReady, it'll show you the growth from one benchmark to the next for each individual student. It'll show you what the projected growth should be and whether or not the student is meeting that projected growth. So that's, you know, relatively straightforward, if you will.
So this is just what we do.
Is there a reason why ELA test scores are not included as a metric? Maybe you
I
could
think state test scores in general, that's one of my questions.
I mean,
There's no state test scores at all.
They can, we didn't include this year because we don't get as timely data, we don't get timely data from the state test scores as we do these. So if what our staff does, and Margaret, correct me, these are benchmark assessments, these are whatever type of assessment where you get quick feedback and teachers
Everybody
can make
sits for
adjustments.
Everybody doesn't sit for the ELA and the math tests.
So are you being flagged as a participation rate improvement plan because you don't have enough kids sitting for the test?
They waived it during the past couple of years, but we would have been.
The reason to use that as a metric.
The past year at the middle school, I believe the opt-out rate was close to 40%.
How about at the elementary school? Because I just
Better
went,
at the elementary schools.
Yeah,
Probably.
I didn't notice, because I just was on NICEAG website today, and I didn't think that you had that huge of an opt-out rate at the elementary school.
It was closer at the elementary schools. I don't remember the number. I know the middle school because I was actually quite surprised.
I only asked because the iReady assessment, sometimes that's not accurate because it's flagged that the kid is rushing.
If the kid rushes, they do flag the teacher to let them know that they're just kind of going A, B, C, D, kind of thing.
So, I mean, I would really like to see ELA test scores as part of this.
Sure, we can, and we don't,
State
you know,
test.
we look at those things, but we look at them kind of like that because first of all, we have an issue with opt-out rate. Secondly, the test has changed probably 6 times in the past few years, and it's about to change again. So we're moving to a new publisher yet again this spring. We're going to Questar. A few years back, they changed it from a 3-day test to a 2-day test. So it changed from time to untimed.
Is the state still using that test to flag districts as low performing districts? Or
Not
they're
in,
not?
not in the past few years because of
Because of COVID.
everything that's happened.
But this year, I thought that they were going to use. the
It's
test
only
to
one
flag.
measure of the new SS standards. So there are literally probably a dozen metrics involved in the new ESSA plan for New York State. And the test scores are only a piece of that. There are many other things, attendance, for example, that they look at to determine whether a school district, and they look at subgroup performance. So it's not all students, it's all students and then all of the subgroups that are part.
Maybe we should be looking at attendance here too.
Well, that can certainly be another measure. It's not an academic
Right.
measure, but yes. And we are concerned about that because we do know there are some places where we do have attendance issues. And as we know, you have to be in school to be able to learn. So I guess I have the next slide too. I didn't realize. The last slide is AIS reading. So students support in AIS reading and math, decoding and comprehension on the reading side of the house, and the math strands, so geometry, measurement, fractions, etc. And we ask these are the questions that we ask internally. How many students are there in each tier of service? There are 3 tiers. Tier 1 happens in the classroom. Tier 2, you are going out to an AIS specialist. Tier 3, the groups usually get smaller and the amount of time you spend grows longer. What's the average length of service for any of our students? And what's the frequency of instruction at the tier? Am I seen every day? Am I seen every other day? All of those are issues that we look at as we look at tier 2 and tier 3 service in both reading and math. And that's K-8.
Hold on, 1 second. Can you just for the folks at home know what AIS reading and math is?
Academic intervention support. So when a child is struggling in reading and math based on criteria that we agree to at the district level, then they are referred to a specialist for additional support.
At the middle school level, you have to be 2 grade levels behind. Is that the same policy we have at the district at the elementary school level?
I'm not sure I'm following.
Reading 2 grade levels.
In reading or math, yes. So there's the way the criteria is set up, you're on level, you're approaching level, or you're below level. So we look at the approaching and the on as tier 1 service. That's the teacher in the classroom through whole and small group instruction. And then anybody beyond that is going out for support.
How are kindergartners getting, in this model, getting recommended for AIS services?
In the same way, so at the K building, Belinda, who's the math specialist, will look at their results. They have the same screenings that all of the other students have. And then based on what she sees, she'll see small groups, or sometimes she'll push in. And the same happens with reading.
How long does it take?
To get them service?
Yeah,
How
they're a
much- they're
kindergartner,
starting-
there's no history of it. So when does a kindergartner fall into that, like,
So when
realm of
we
measurement?
do our fall assessments, you can generalize and say, if I have a class of 20 students and 15 of them are here, and these kids are here, you ask yourself the question, should they not be where their peers are, and what can we do to help them get there? Very often at K, and sometimes at 1, but more frequently at K, that service is a push-in. So the specialist will go in and work with the classroom teacher, so they're not pulling the kids out of the room.
And that starts beginning of the year?
I would say it probably starts in November, because we get through they do their assessment a little bit of a lag
Yeah.
from the older kids.
Cool, thank you.
All right, so I'm doing student supports, and really, it's really about the social emotional piece of it. So as we talk about this, we added a school counselor this year, which I think has alleviated a lot of stress on Abby, who's doing 900 kids by herself. We also added a social worker at that level too. So when we talk about this, we know who our frequent flyers were from before, like Abby had every kid. So that is a helpful thing for us. But now let's look at the number of students referred for a small group, referred for a small social emotional group. Let's look at how long we see them. When we do building level service, we call that like a 3-touch. And then a light touch. We don't just let them go, right? We make sure we say, let's check in 2 weeks. We talk to the teacher, we talk to the parents, depending on what the student has going on. We also talk about small groups, like Abby and Jen do a lot of different social groups. They do new friends, they do banana splits, as we knew when we were kids, parents that were divorced, parents that are separating. We do a lot of executive functioning groups. So parents are actually sent home a wonderful array of services that they can participate in. And they will do a 3 to 5 week session with a small group of kids in their own grade, kids with another grade, or maybe sometimes it's like a 2 to 1. That's the intensity of what the student needs. So we've always made, I don't want to say a cheat sheet, but who we see, how often we see, how frequently. So they've actually started to look at that as a building, saying, how many kindergartners did we see this year? How many kindergartners did we see last year? And we look at the kindergartners in all 3 buildings last year, because Abby did all 3 buildings, along with Jen, along with Jamie Manning as well. So we are keeping track of that. We were kind of dumbfounded one day when one building saw 72 kids in one day. And then we associated it to an incident that happened at a football game that made the kids a little nervous. So we did a large group of, this is what happened, let's not be scared, we're safe at school. So we did a lot of that because there was some fear in what happened at a game. So that's like an anomaly. Thank you, gosh, it's been a long day. For those who've been in our meetings all day. But I think those are the things that we really look at. And we talk about a lot about friendships, because as we know, this was transition, and Corey said this. The kindergartners, they come in like, okay, Your first graders are okay, but when you hit your second and third grade, there was still a lot of, I didn't know, or we had a parent here talking to us about her fifth grade child, right? She didn't have a lot of friends in her class. So we really do a lot about friendships. What are friendships? How do we create friendships? How do we have these conversations when you don't have a friend in the classroom? So they're really keeping a lot of different statistics. These are statistics we didn't normally keep on a daily basis. We did keeping like, hey, should we refer this child? Hey, should we talk about anxiety with this child? But this is at a different level. We're talking more about the friendships. We're talking more about executive functioning. We're talking a lot about social. We're talking a lot about transition, prepping for transition. What does that look like? On top of doing all the SEL lessons, the bully prevention, the good touch, bad touch. So we're continuously collecting data, but making sure that data is now in a very detailed spreadsheet. So that's how we're keeping the SEL piece of that for all the kids K to 5. Any questions on that? That is something new this year.
I don't know if this belongs here, maybe it's somewhere else.
Sure.
The behavioral referrals by grade level, if we can compare them from last year to this year.
I'll throw that over to Joe because I don't do behavior.
Yeah, one of the, that is a discussion we had with the elementary principals earlier this year, was not just are they seeing an uptick in behavior, but it might be difficult to compare to last year because they saw everything, right? Last year they saw K to 5. Now we may be able to say to go back and look at fifth grade to pull Princeton, Spank G and BB fifth grade and compare it to today's fifth grade. We'll have to see if that information is still alive in Infinite Campus. But with the transitions, we agreed to use Infinite Campus, which is our data management service, much more as a communication tool for principals and principals and staff as they move between buildings. Before Infinite Campus was really your schedule and attendance and those things, but the elementary principals are using it to document behaviors as well, not just referrals, but even concerns. It's almost, like a digital journal that can be used.
That'll go from building to building.
That then would go to.
And we all have access to that. So like when I'm looking at a kid to refer, or if someone refers, I go through all of that. I go through grades, I go through all the behavior incidents. Attendance, like Margaret said, is huge. And that's a big piece. And I know it's under the student support, but it's really also under this part of student report, because if Joe's not coming to school, that social worker, that school counselor are going to be on that and know what's going on alongside of the teacher and the principal.
Go ahead. Oh, wait.
So is it safe to ask, and from what I'm hearing, we're already collecting this data too.
Correct.
So for student support and for student achievement, we could, in a very short period of time, from what it sounds like, start to present metrics on where our baseline is right now. We've only got half the year under us, so I think we can't make any assumptions one way or the other, right, as to whether or not this is having a big effect. But at least we can start to baseline everything right now.
Correct.
And it would be great for us to be able to see those baseline metrics as they stand today, within a short period of time. We don't have to wait till the end of the year.
What we envisioned, and Jeremy went there, was, it could appear any number of ways. It could be, state of the district sort of academic report, that by the time we get all of our benchmarking information in the system, that probably would be able to do that in July, and then go backwards to see where blips on the radar were. So you have your beginning of the year assessment to really determine if there was any summer lag. What happened with really between the first number of months of school, so mid-year, now let's say in the next 4 weeks, and then what happens at the end of the year. So we could do that. What we were looking at was having a full and complete report in July, but that's not to say we couldn't go and say, let's randomly select 50 fifth graders this year at their January ELA and math benchmark. Randomly select 50 of them, and randomly select 50 from last year, and see where we get.
It was one of our,
Yeah, that's.
I was just gonna point out, it was on one of our board
the district goals, that it was gonna be before the end of the school year, that we're actually gonna see numbers. So that was something that we discussed and voted on, I think in October.
That's right. My point is we don't have to wait till the end of the year for that.
Right.
I know that we said that we could, but it doesn't sound like we, the whole point was we were waiting to get that data. But it doesn't sound like we have to wait.
Well, if you want to see the snapshot moment in time, that's what the benchmark would do. With the end of the year, looking at the data at the end of the year would.
100%.
Okay. I just want to make sure
I'm saying we can baseline where we are right now.
we can
So,
show you.
right, I'm not saying that we can show we can't show the trends
Right.
because we're only halfway into the year. What we can show is where are we at the beginning of the year because we have the historical information. How does that compare to the year before? Because we have that historical information. So we can actually look at the Princeton plan transition. And then eventually in 3 to 4 years, you can look at the Princeton plan itself and have a scientific measurement to say, did this actually work as we expected it?
Yeah, I was just pointing out, time is a limited resource and we're going into budget season and we've got other things going on. So I don't know how quickly it would be reasonable to expect that they could give us those numbers.
Well, let's look at, I made that up on the fly for you, saying, 50 randomly selected kids, because that might not be a bad way to start, because at the end of the year, we would have all of it.
Yeah.
I think Jeremy has a question for Lisa.
You mentioned we hired 2 new roles, a counselor and a social worker.
Correct.
What's the difference between them and why did we hire them?
So a school counselor has actually been mandated now at the elementary for 2 years. So their role is really to start with the college and career readiness. I know that sounds crazy, but they need to be doing that in kindergarten and first grade. They talk about firefighters and what do you want to be, and they draw and all that stuff. So that's part of the new mandate. And we had one school counselor doing 950 kids by herself. And that was a little extreme. So we had decided with some of the money that I put in my budget last year is that we would hire a second social worker, so they split up the 6 grades. The school counselor, the social worker does a lot of, they are a licensed clinician, where a school counselor is certified by the state as a school counselor. So you go to school to be a school counselor, you get a certificate. So all of our social workers are MSWs and they have a clinical license. So that's the difference between the two. Anybody can do school counseling, anybody can do counseling. But when you have an IEP student, you typically want them to have a social worker or a psychologist, just because of the level of stuff that's happening and how it aligns to the IEP.
Why did we need one now and not previously?
We had promised when we went to Princeton plan that we would have a social worker in each building. So that's why we were down a social worker, with the exception of BB, because Donna wanted to keep a psychologist there versus a social worker because of the relationship and collaboration they already had. So Jen is the psychologist, social worker at BB. The other 2 have full-time social workers. Okay.
You think, now
Yeah.
also, I
Yeah.
think we need to add that in as part of the Princeton plan expense from a savings standpoint, right? We promised a social worker as part of this, then we need to add their salary in, which hasn't been calculated into the overall savings of the $1 million. So we need to make sure that that's added into our overall expense associated with the transition, because nobody's captured that number in any of our financials yet.
Well, that person was already here. So they,
We added one. I thought you said, didn't you say we added 2? We added a social worker and a counselor.
well, the social worker that we added is an existing position. Right? So she replaced a different social worker.
I think the question is, did moving to the Princeton plan add new staff and student support or reallocate? Would we have, if we were
You don't have to answer.
still,
No, I had to count in my head, like, where were we?
if we were still K5, 3 K5s, would we have still articulated the need for more than one school counselor?
Yes, because we had one school counselor doing 950 kids, and by law, not by law, but state standards, it's about 250 per student recommended by the state for a school counselor.
So we're still not at that.
We're not at that, but because we have the social workers piece of that, that has kind of helped alleviate that, because they pick up some of the counseling, they pick up some of the social drama, they might do some small groups, things like that.
So we have no net new staff, but the one which we had to add.
Right, correct.
Awesome. And then what is what is the plan? Because the transitions don't end, right?
No,
We did it once, but now we're gonna do it every year.
you want to know what our transition plan is from building to building?
So, yeah, but so how do we ensure that we don't have regression amongst the kids as they're transitioning?
So once we get back, probably from February break, we've already started these conversations. The great thing is our school counselors transition with their students. So Jen does K1 and 2. Abby does 3, 4, and 5. So they're in second grade. Abby's already in the building and gets to know them. And all the kids, except for probably your Ks right now, know Abby. So they transition together. That transition is happening all the time, that conversation. What we are going to do probably at February, you'll see the school clinicians, the social workers and psychologists start to go down the level. And they'll go and they'll start meeting with the kids and the other social workers. They will go into the classrooms, get to know kids. So the kids know that there's familiar people. They're always meeting and articulating issues with kids, students with kids. We have Infinite Campus that tracks everything. We have Frontline, which is our IEP and 504 database that tracks with the students. So there's always stuff happening that goes with the student. And we've also started it's not a Google sheet, but it's like a binder that we keep for kids. And when we go, a binder goes from each clinician to the other saying, hey, listen, let's keep these 2 kids apart. Let's do this. Let's really focus. This child should have a teacher who is very caring and thoughtful and, you know, has a different type of demeanor than this teacher. So we already started a process for that.
Great, thank you.
Trust me, it won't ever stop because we've got to actually get better at going 5th to 6th, which we already brought our 5th graders up. Some of the special ed kids, we haven't brought everybody up, but we will start transitioning them. So they get to the 5th grade and our 8th graders get up to the high school. We just had that conversation today in strategic planning.
So sped kids are a bigger concern for me with respect to transitions. So a counselor is not gonna be the glue for sped kids, right? That's an entire experience in the classroom. What's the plan to make sure that those kids don't have, it's enough of a regression for them often when they go from classroom A to classroom B, and they can borrow from the support staff in classroom A, can come to classroom B, and those teachers can sort of lead with each other.
Right.
What's the goal when we've now created these silos and now they don't have their support network or the familiarity of the building or the former staff because they're no longer physically present? How do we try to bridge that gap for those kids?
Well, one of the things that used to happen prior to Princeton, which I'm not for, Margaret and I were having this conversation today, they used to loop 3 years. But imagine if your special ed teacher loops 3 years, they're not getting to know that curriculum and that content. Especially when you go 3 to 4 and 4 to 5, that content changes dramatically. So those teachers are not getting deep. They're just keep getting wider and wider, and they're not getting to know that curriculum. So we were talking to the kids, to the teachers transition 1 year, do they go K to 1 and back down to 1? That's an option. But in order for them to go class from building to building, I think the biggest thing that we have to do as educators is really begin those introductions sooner than later and match our kids. And I will say I'm very Princeton planned because I'm selfish for my special ed kids, right? They don't have to leave a building to get the services. They don't go without services because they didn't want to move their community school. Now everybody gets what they need. And it is so exciting to me because the collaboration among special ed teachers is probably the best I've ever seen. So I don't anticipate an issue. Again, it'd be that February time we start having conversations about, okay, I'm gonna get Joe this year. Can you tell me, I'm gonna come down and meet them. And we do a lot of exchanging, coming down and back and forth and getting to know each other.
Weren't the special ed teachers in one building previously?
No.
ICT.
ICT, we had, it would be grades K and 3. It'd be K and 3, that would be in one building. And the next building you have 1 and 4, and then 2 and 5.
Right.
So basically, those kids would have to move if you didn't want them in your home school. So if Joe is my child and he's in BV, but the program is in Furnace Woods, and I don't want to move him to Furnace Woods.
Have we kept track of this for the years of how many people did move their kids?
Oh, I can pull that data, yeah. And they would totally deny, they would totally.
People have to move that don't now want to move, so that's a coin toss for me.
Well, yeah, we can go there, but I think when I think about kids, it's not about the kid, it's not about the adults, and I feel bad saying that, it's about the kids that are getting the services they need. And we're hoping that.
Are we not giving the kids the services they need?
Well, we definitely were, but if parents didn't want to move them, I couldn't force them to move them.
But then they had
But
alternates.
yeah, they had like.
They would get-
Like they had the other program, what was
Well, they
it?
get resource room,
Right,
but they
resource.
really needed ICT, the big difference between the two. So, what I would say to you is that we will hope that classification rate could go a little bit lower because we have so much collaboration. And I think we heard that today with all these teachers and all the grade level leaders meeting this morning. It was actually exciting for me to hear all of them speak and talk. And I know, isn't this great that we can? Isn't this great that we can? It's all a learning experience, but it's just the light in their eyes. It was a different feeling for me this morning. I don't know about you. You know, so I think that's one of the things we definitely, we will transition students and we'll transition them seamlessly because that's what our teachers do.
And we have something to measure. What was happening, what is happening to. Is there a different measurement for different classifications of students in terms of transitioning expectations? I would assume that a gen ed kid would be expected to transition differently than a sped kid who has a 1-to-1 aid, right?
But yes,
So do they keep their aids when they transition? Does that?
we try to, but you also want to remember, you don't ever want to keep a child dependent upon one adult.
One adult. Okay, thank you.
If I could just add something that Lisa brought up that is important, and we didn't say it in the academic issue, but I want you to be reassured. The academic information that we collect on students is always transferred to the next year's teacher. It always has been, and it will continue to be. Kids that are getting services in AIS reading or math, there are databases where those service providers provide the interventions, the progress or the lack of progress, so that next year's teacher, or sometimes you transition in a given year. So we have in some buildings, we have 2 reading teachers in each of the 3 elementary buildings. I might go from Lisa to Margaret during the course of a year for a different reason. We have the ability to look at each other's records, to look at the kinds of work that we've done with kids. So everything is there for everybody to access when they need it.
I think that goes with the special ed piece too. The students now don't have to leave the building. So if I need to go into an ICT class, it's right next door. And I've always known Margaret because we're always doing fun things as a grade level. So the kids aren't moving in a long direction, or or their parents are not moving them at all. Now it's just moving within that building and it's just a comfort. So to know that the kids are getting the services that the CSE determined they needed and the parents either accepted or rejected at that point, now it's an easy acceptance because it's just next door.
A little off topic, you said the average caseload for a school counselor was 250?
No, that's not what I said. What I said was the state recommends 250 students per school counselor. That's the recommendation.
Grade level?
That is actually the recommendation of a school counselor, K-12.
Okay, yep, thank you.
I have a question or a couple of questions. When I'm going back to the, your slide on student support, the process of referral
Yep.
for counseling or help, is that like an official referral or is that just like, hey, little Johnny's having a hard time?
So they go through the MTSS process or RTI process, so the multi-tiered support systems, or the response to intervention is what it was prior years. So they would go through that whole committee and they make sure that those, in most of the buildings, the committee meets very quickly. So if we see that Johnny is really socially not making it, Abby might do a soft touch, Jen might do a soft touch, but then they go through the formal process to get to building level. And if the building level isn't enough, then they probably want to recommend somebody from the outside see the student.
I'm asking from like a metric standpoint because I'm a parent in FGL.
Mhm.
And I hate to even talk about this because my kid is one of them, but dropping off every day, I watched all these children crying and
Yeah.
upset and, you know, I'm sure some level of that is completely normal. I mean, my son was being yanked out of the car, he's in 1st grade. And I'm just curious if that was documented. Because I would
Yeah.
like to know year over year how these little bodies are doing, because it was very detrimental. I mean, I know personally speaking, and I hate to talk personal, but I just want to know, like, was this normal? Did we see this last year with kids going back to school?
We see that up to 7th, 8th grade.
Right, but so for certain students, right, are we tracking how, so my son I'm using him as an example. He will go to 2nd grade, he'll go to BB. Next year could be terrible transitioning again. is that gonna be documented? And then third grade might be fine, and then fourth grade won't be good. So I'm just saying, is crying coming out of the car part of this referral process?
It could be.
I mean, he stopped, the minute he got it.
We can definitely have a conversation privately if you'd like to
No,
talk
no,
about
I
that.
don't, he's
but I-
doing fine, he's
right,
surviving, but what I'm
but-
saying is, how serious is this referral? You know, are we documenting and capturing those that are mildly struggling?
Yeah,
Just so that we
yes,
can
I can reach
monitor.
out to Jamie today, and Jamie or Jen or Andrea can tell me, these are my hot cases, the ones that just need to soft touch, they just need me to say hi to them on Monday morning.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay, I wasn't sure if the referral thing was more serious than it sounds.
no, so a referral to all this is just building level. A referral to the PPS office is a whole nother process.
Got it, okay.
Yep.
Makes sense. Awesome. All right, cool. What was my other question? I guess, so we got through, right? Or no,
We're done.
Uh, Yeah, in terms of operational metrics that we have, I know we talked earlier before the new year. About bus capacity, how far buses, how long the children are on buses, how far the buses drive, and behavioral referrals on the bus. That is quantitative information that we collect and continue to collect. In terms of financial, this gets really into staffing. Staffing models of the non-Princeton plan versus Princeton plan. We do have a live spreadsheet that we use to say, okay, if in current year 22-23, if we were not in Princeton plan, what would our sections look like? How many teachers per section, grade level, that kind of thing. We're going to lose that over time because as more students register, they're registering as a student, not by geography, meaning they're not registering as a Frank G student or a BB or a so forth. So in our system, they come in as a kindergarten, or they leave as a first grader, not belonging to a particular neighborhood school. So we will be able to benchmark ourselves against the Princeton plan, but really we will lose the opportunity to say, well, in 5 years from now, if we weren't the Princeton plan, can we still make up, what those neighborhood schools would look like? We do have data going back, and I think I sent it to the board, and Jeremy cleaned it up for me, but going back to 2016, I think, school year 2016-17. So you can see trends over time in terms of what enrollment looked like in the 3 elementary schools by grade level, average class size, what the variances were by grade level, by school. So we have that historical data, and we'll continue to add to that. And then that ends with the last piece about who are in the classrooms and who are in the schools. Now that we're grade banded, we're pulling some data to look at today. Well, let me go back. New York State collects information, demographic information on every school in early October. Number of students, gender, race, free and reduced lunch, whether they have special education services. So we have always had access to that information. So what we can show is, okay, last year BB's demographics were X, and now BB's demographics are different, but those are apples to oranges because last year it was geographical. Now it's a district-wide second half of the grade. What we can do, and we're pulling this information right now, is to look at the demographic makeup within each of our 50+ classrooms, K through 5, to see how that might be similar or different from the demographic makeup of the schools last year, in terms of the population in the school versus what the population is of the classrooms. Principals organize classrooms this year. The only caveat I would say is to try to keep friends together and try to keep kids together by school. So it wasn't done. Class lists weren't done through a lens of equity per se. They were done through a lens of familiarity. But over time, we'll be able to look at that as well.
Did we keep track of demographics in classrooms prior to this?
I think it's in the system. I'm looking at Carmen because she's the system person, and not that we actively kept track of it, but it might be a report that we could run, for example, Carmen's running the reports right now, I looked at it today or maybe yesterday, 4th grade, what the breakdown is, so we may have access to that.
You know, just to that point of the system, it would seem that it would just be another data point to capture to determine what a kid's homeschool would have been. So you can do a look back in 5 years. I don't know why banding would stop it. You just,
Their address.
yeah, their address. So like,
Yeah,
wouldn't we want to capture that?
We could do that. Oh,
It's just
we
an
absolutely would.
It's just a data. Well, you said we lose it,
Well, what
but
we'll
we
lose,
shouldn't.
what we'll lose is building by grade level, by classroom, that kind of thing. But we would be, in 5 years, we would be able to say how many kids would be at BB if we were K-5.
Right.
Yeah, I want to, yes, we would be able to do K-5 enrollment because we'd be able to look at their addresses, figure out which school they should be if they're close on that.
Can I had a question written for a while, so going back to probably to you guys. How are we, what's the directive given to the staff with these metrics and how we're looking at them differently or what to, I'm kind of going back to Corey was saying, like, what's different about this? What are we looking at to be different in this transition? And if let's just say in January, end of January, there are some red flags, right? Do you have a plan to address that going forward? Like, what do we do? What's the plan?
So that's interesting because I actually had this conversation this morning. Curriculum didn't change in the Princeton plan. We have a written curriculum. The question is the written curriculum the taught curriculum in every classroom every day? So the question that I would assume that because the grade levels are together and based on the conversations I've had sporadically with teachers so far this year and their enthusiasm for the work they believe they're doing, but I would see a little bump positively in some of the achievement measures. Not all. I understand the stress of packing, unpacking, all that other stuff that we had to go through. I think if we don't see something, or if we see a lot of negative, then we have to have individual conversations at each school to say, in your learning walks, what are you seeing? Are you seeing that the written curriculum, whether we write it ourselves or we purchase it, is the top curriculum? Because if that's not the case, we already have a gap we have to address. So that's the first step. And then we go from there before we can, because if we're not teaching the existing curriculum, then we can't say that curriculum isn't working. Right. So, it was a really interesting conversation that we had this morning, and we are beginning as an administrative team to get back into the swing of learning walks in all 5 schools as a team. So that work will start again. We have a meeting on Monday with someone who is leading us in how to develop that and what are we looking for, et cetera. So I think we're all looking forward to that opportunity again.
And then if we've used correct me if I'm wrong here, we've used the writing workshop now for quite a few years, right?
Yes.
I think my son could pilot, he's a senior.
Okay.
Do we have metrics? What are we looking at to see how that's working? So far, right? What are we seeing? Are we seeing improvements in students? And if we're going to continue using that same, staff developments and the same program, can we go back that far and compare? Like, we never really saw if that, after, I don't know, 6 or 7 years of that, how that's improved. So we haven't said, I don't know if we've seen improvements.
Right, so the writing pieces are evaluated through a rubric. So the teacher is using the rubric, the same rubric on the grade applied to the student work. It's a little bit softer than the iReady piece, which is, although, some people have issues with computer-based testing as well for a whole host of other reasons. But yes, I think you could look back and see, especially if you track your student, to see the improvement from one grade to the next. Again, the work is the work. So the unit of study is the unit of study. how is it being delivered? How is it being assessed in the classroom, et cetera? But yeah, we could look at that across the board and say, where are we seeing gaps? And, you know, as I was just talking to one of the teachers this afternoon, really the work and curriculum revision, and now that they're all together, it'll be a little easier, is as we teach a unit of study, we don't all have to be on the same page the same day. That's ridiculous. But we should be close enough together as a grade level to be able to come to a monthly meeting and say, how is that going? And when we're finished with that unit, that's the time to say, what worked, what didn't work, what do we need to change, what do we need to take out, what do we need to add, do we need a new novel? Not, you know, we can wait till the end of the year, but having done that with many other places, sometimes you forget, wait, what was the unit we did in October? How did that go? So do it as you're working. And I'm seeing more of those conversations happening in the moment as opposed to down the line when I've lost some of those thought processes.
How often are and I mean, I guess this is also kind of measured, how often are the staff at each grade level able to meet within the building? Are there some buildings that are easier than others? Like, I'm going to assume it's easier at Furnace Woods because their prep period is the end of the day for them to meet, than it might be.
Well, but at BV and Frank G, their prep is in the morning.
You know, it's a totally different, it's different. The kids are in the building. It's a whole, there's always other meetings. I mean, that's how it was always scheduled. The kids are sometimes in the rooms with the teacher.
I don't know, I've actually found it to be the reverse, that it was always easier for me to grab people at the 8:30 to 9 session than at the end of the day, but that's, you know, that's neither here nor there. They are required to meet once a month, so that's part of their contract. They meet as a grade level formally once a month after school. No, that's a grade level meeting.
Okay.
At 6:12, it's a department meeting. What I am hearing, another positive, is that people are saying, can we meet more often? You know, can we look at the schedule for the building and find a way to kind of manipulate some things so the grade level can be freed up more frequently? They are meeting in common preps. So if you have a team of 8 teachers, you may have 4 teachers that have a prep at 10 and the other 4 have a prep at 1 o'clock. That's a function of how many specials am I running in order to be able to give the prep. So the prep will meet together. And, you know, I know that once a month they have an ELA data meeting on their common prep, and once a month they have a math data meeting. What they do with the remainder of those days sometimes is up to the individual principals and or the individual teachers to say, you know, can we get together at 10 o'clock tomorrow and talk about the last unit test? But it was interesting to see because I've asked them, they keep a running sheet for me about what they'd like to stop doing, what they'd like to tweak a little bit, and what they'd like to start doing. And it's interesting that a lot of the grade levels were, how can we find more time to meet now that we're in the same building?
Well, because before, if you only had 3 or 4 teachers on grade level, they were in the same wing, right? It was almost easier for those 4 teachers to meet than it is now that they're all together. I think, I mean, it's gonna be challenging to get 8 of them, plus the ICT teachers, then who's at lunch, and who does lunch, who helps at lunch, right? Because there's staff that work the lunch period as well.
There are some creative ways to schedule the elementary building to do that, and I think that I find it to be a positive that they're looking at ways to talk to each other more frequently. Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm gonna reserve that one. When Erica, going back, asked about measuring success of a program, the response was, we could do that. So we don't do that now.
Yeah, we are doing it.
So
It's a little bit, sorry, let's forget about this. It's a little trickier with writing in terms of the raw numbers. So they assess a writing piece in the fall at K-5 and in the June, spring benchmark. So we have those numbers and we can look at them. I would prefer almost to look at it by cohort instead of by grade, so I can see the progress and the movement going forward.
but do we assess year over year now and say, well, this is where this grade performed and this is where this grade, you know, like this class of 2022 was in 8th grade, they were performing here, and class of 2021, when they were in 8th grade, they were performing at a level that is in some acceptable deviation plus or minus? Are we actually going through and measuring that and figuring out what we're doing differently and what we should do different to keep finding positive growth in the right direction? Or is that not something we're doing yet?
I would say that we haven't done it with enough regularity across all buildings.
Do you know that, Joe? That we don't measure that regularly?
We measure it, we don't share it. So that's what I'm saying. We measure, we have the numbers we can go into.
I want to pick, I want to understand so that I'm clear. What does, we don't measure it with enough regularity? That doesn't mean we don't share. That means we don't.
Enough regularity. They measure it, they report the results
To who?
to their building principal, to me, so it's shared. But it's not,
But no,
there
does
isn't a
anyone-
conversation about why did your class do better than mine? What are you doing that I could be doing?
Well, that's not my ask.
Okay,
My ask is, let's go, do I change it? Class of 2022, how they performed in 8th grade. The class of 2021, how they performed in 8th grade. Who's measuring the variation in scoring or whatever the rubric or whatever that you're using? Who measures that? And then who is overseeing the interpretation of that data to make certain that we're following our kids on the appropriate academic trajectory so that we are continuously finding positive gains? What I'm hearing is we capture data and it sits. And that seems to me like A, bad practice, but B, a waste of time because we're just capturing data for capturing it. If we're not actually analyzing it and utilizing it to make academic adjustments for success for our students. So I think it's really important that we hear these kinds of what we could and should do and start creating plans that say this is what we're going to do and have dates and times and hold people accountable to making sure we do these analyses.
So talk about what would a group of teachers do at the end of 5th grade looking at math and ELA data to inform 6th grade folks, to identify programs or services as they go into 6th grade, or to make their own set of adjustments for next year's 5th grade kids?
so sending the kids forward is pretty straightforward because the kids' performance goes with them. So I'm gonna sit and tell Lisa, here are my 25 kids, here's how they did, here's what you should be looking for. What I also want that teacher to do, and we talked about it earlier this year with the results from the ELA tests and the math tests, is look at the item analysis and look at it holistically based on what you taught. So if we look at our results and we say, oh, you know, our kids didn't do so great with nonfiction, and I go back to the nonfiction work that I do in my grade level and bolster that, improve, change the questioning, use the language of the test in some of the questions that I use. That's how you use the data to tweak your instruction. I'm going to be honest with you and say there's always room for improvement in that. We asked that question many, many times. There's so much data coming at us that you have to sometimes just take a breath and say, which of this is important to us to move forward? And which of it is just a lot of noise in the background? And then use the data. It's written on my board in my office. We have to use the data better than we have been using it to make adjustments to our instruction. Absolutely. In every classroom and in every grade, K-12. If I give an assessment and all I do is give a grade and nothing changes except I gave you an 85, I want to know why was it an 85 or why was it a 75? What could I do differently next time to make that grade be a better grade for that student? That's what we're talking about. We need to get better at that. And I think we are trying very hard this year, again, now that we're all together and we're looking at stuff more collectively to use the data that's in front of us, not just from the state tests, although we certainly started by analyzing the questions and saying, why is this type of question tripping up our kids? Because it shouldn't be. And then how do we use that to change the work that we're doing every day? So the next time they come to a question like that, it isn't so scary or so hard to interpret that I can't give you a coherent answer. Lots of times as teachers, I'm sure Stephanie would agree, we know what kids can do. And then we get a test back and we're like, how could this be possible? You know, I see this kid work with me every day.
Yeah.
So there's that. But I would say in all fairness and in all fairness to all my teacher colleagues that are watching this tonight, I'm not knocking you. We all can get better at using the data to improve our own instruction. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, this is a separate curriculum conversation, so I don't want to derail it. So thank you for that explanation. I have some more questions about it with respect to program duration and measuring its success, not teachers. Grade to grade, yeah, 100%, because it sounds like a long time for writers workshop to be in place if we're not really measuring it. We don't really know what its impact has been.
We're not
Or not.
using it.
Like, what grade was it implemented? How old was Tony when they put it in?
So he's a senior now, he was in 5th grade. He
So
was
it's
the-
this
I
the
think he was
seventh
the
or eighth
pilot.
year? Like, I think it makes sense to know what our kids' performance has been since the introduction and why we would continue using it after all these years if we're not seeing market improvement compared to. So anyway, but thank you.
So the next
Can I
piece,
talk?
I'm sorry, I didn't see.
Jen. Jen, we- So. How far? What are we using as a base? So. Is today, or is this year our baseline, or are we going back to previous years? What are we comparing to? How far back?
So it's funny you said that, because we had a conversation in our strategic plan meetings today about year zero, right? Like, in strategic plan sense, this is year zero. Last year, we were getting input, we were figuring out priorities. This year, we've identified our four areas. We are, we're building the system. So we could consider this year zero because this is, we're in the Princeton plan. What we have, and what Corey said is, well, which of these measures can we go back to check last year while we're continuing to run that data model this year? So to me, that doesn't matter as much, because at the end of the year, let me finish the sentence and then I'll correct it again. At the end of the year, we'll be able to say, okay, the 5th grade, how is 5th grade performance at the end of this year with some of these measures compared to last year? Then we'll be able to go into 5th grade performance, and this was something Corey said, and said, okay, well, what was the performance in September? What was the snapshot in September? What was the snapshot in January, and then the end of the year? So we can use last year. One of the fears of last year was first year out of COVID, still trying to get our feet wet. It's not going to be completely clean. So part of our conversation in the retreat was to use this year, year zero, and improve upon the year. That doesn't mean we should ignore any of this or what happened last year. So we can do, but I guess my long-winded answer is both. But in terms of making adjustments for next year, we should make those adjustments for next year based on what we experienced this year, because this is the first year we were in this model. But we can look back and peek and say, well, how did those 5th graders do in June 22 compared to how our 5th graders will do in June 20?
Yeah, I just want to make sure. Okay, I think you answered my question. I think we probably still have to talk about it a little bit more, maybe once you get the data. Only because I don't want us to all be comparing to different things, like, oh, pre-Princeton, or where are we today versus where can we be? What can we improve on? I just want us to make sure we're all measuring or thinking about the same thing when we have a discussion. I had a question about social workers, but I think I'll just save that for later. But I guess I also want to make sure, like, when we talk about achievement, we're not just talking about grades. We're talking about our kids performing either higher than expected or are they at least meeting their targets? So I think you are already thinking that way, but I just want to make sure us as a board is not just thinking about a state. I'm not saying state tests are not of no concern or not a data point, but it's like, are our kids doing better, achieving higher than previously, and year over year, are they getting better and better? Something for us to think about when we get the data.
The next phase of this conversation is data that we don't collect. Is really the experience. So I'm not going to read every word on the slide, but basically, are we interested in collecting information in a scientific way on the student experience, the staff experience, and the parental experience? And if so, how should we do that? And how often and whom? We had a conversation, and Lisa and her team were ready to go to have counselors or social workers blow in and do, very basic surveys of kids, how you doing, thumbs up, thumbs down, smiley face or sad face, and we put a pause in that because that will give the clinicians information of how are you right now in this moment, can we help you, as opposed to trying to look at something in a scientific or reliable way. So this gets a little it gets a little like PhD like, because statisticians are very, very particular about what they're asking, the frequency of asking, and making sure they're asking the right questions to the right people to benchmark that over time. So it's just as much as we benchmark what did kids learn or what didn't they, we're trying to benchmark how do people feel and have their feelings change. And we talked a lot about that later this afternoon in our strategic plan, that we experience growth. The feedback we received from about 700 surveys this year compared to last year's, we experienced growth in communication and sense of belonging and those sort of things. That's great. Is that a reliable measure? Did we ask the right people? Did we ask the right subgroups of people? Did we have the right parents represented? So this is what I'll leave these two slides sort of where they are for us to have a conversation. Doesn't need to happen tonight. It can happen another time, but are we interested in understanding the experience of kids, staff, and parents in a different way? Because we really don't have a mechanism to collect that information right now, aside from, as I said earlier, we asked for some very raw feedback. How's it going? How are you feeling? We asked people to email us about their experience, and we heard a lot of different beliefs from a lot of different types of people. I think it was Stephanie that said a majority of the families that were struggling with the Princeton plan had kids in it, and the majority of families that supported it no longer did or didn't. So really the question is, do we want to get into collecting experiential data scientifically from those three stakeholders?
Can we collect data from the PTAs, just being active in the PTA? When I was in elementary school, they should know if they have an increase in parental volunteers for each grade level, because they have more parents in each grade level. And that was always we had a lot of volunteers and parental involvement. So I think that would be something we could capture right now compared to last year.
Yeah,
I have that, I actually wrote the same thing down, like, we really need to look at the PTAs and actually also quantify programs that they're running.
Not so much membership,
No,
because
membership is not,
it's real
program-
involvement and
it's
volunteers.
programs, it's volunteerism, it's parent involvement and engagement. We don't have parent engagement and involvement. School doesn't work, right? I mean, you can have teachers, the best teachers in the world in a building, but you need to have that parent involvement and engagement.
yeah,
So-
and that could be, if we choose to, go the route of a survey, that could be the focus of the parental piece of the survey. Do you feel involved? To what extent? Do you know what's going on in your child's school and classroom? I'm making this up, but to what extent are you comfortable with knowing what's going on? So that could be us, it could be PTA, certainly
Yeah, I
PTA
think
will be able to say anecdotally.
The PTA could get that from the Survey Monkey that they always made us use to sign up. Like you always had to put in your slot to sign up for each thing. No? I just think maybe you would get it from that quickly. I think
Yeah.
that's genius. Sorry.
I mean, yes, we could get information quickly, but do we want information quickly, or do we want good information? Do we want objective information from people who aren't? So far, we've reached out as a board. We've had that forum on the first, and we had some people show up, but lots of people didn't show up. I want to make sure that anything we do moving forward is thoughtful and objective and inclusive. I feel like there's a large portion of our community that hasn't reached out. So I want to make sure that we are doing this thoughtfully and professionally.
Thing though,
Yeah.
I think she's saying that we should be measuring parental involvement, not necessarily people giving us feedback, the actual act of being involved.
You actually sign on to a PTA elementary call.
Nobody.
not attended like they were. It's probably 40 people, 20 of them are usually between the executive committee and invited guests. It's like 20 people that are on just to watch.
I do
It's
think
fairly
what
low
you're saying,
compared to the star.
But I'm just saying, how many, so that, yes, we can gather that information, but is that capturing the whole picture? I just want to be thoughtful about it. I don't want to run in and ask quick questions without being thoughtful about it. On the other side of that, though, is what is that gonna cost us? And we have a financial responsibility to make good, sound financial decisions. And if we're hiring an independent company to do this, I think we need to know what that financial commitment would be.
I think we just asked the PTA people. Well, for that portion.
Yeah, for that portion. But yeah, I mean, we definitely need to be, I don't know that you need a third party to survey your students, but this should be happening. But what if people aren't speaking up because of the person who's asking the question? So by having someone who's independent and objective, maybe they feel safer.
So
to
you think
come
that
forward.
going into a first grade classroom, you need an independent person that they're not gonna dare speak to, they're gonna hide?
I'm just hypothesizing. I don't know.
I think that there's a way to be active and be constantly engaging with our community. I mean, I think that you probably need some form of third party, surveying at some point in this Princeton plan debacle, but we should be constantly in touch with our students and our staff and our families. There should be a button that you can click, like, I'm loving today, Princeton plan is great, or third grade is awesome, and teachers should be giving feedback. I mean, this should be constant, right? This shouldn't just be like, let's get a quote to do a survey and then do it in April. This should be continuous.
We're here.
Constant.
I'm pretty sure that we had planned, one of the parts of this plan way back when was to have parent staff panel. Wasn't that part of the?
And multi-children families wanted a place to be heard because they probably could have solved a lot of our challenges that lay before us, right?
What are we, okay, this is gonna sound like a rhetorical question, but it actually isn't. I'm just gonna practice that. Okay, we know, we did our forum, okay, we got quite a few people. Maybe not as many as we wanted, or maybe we're feeling that people didn't come forward because they weren't comfortable. What could we have done differently? Like, we probably need to put together some type of parent committee with our staff and I don't know, because this is not what I do. So this is what you guys do, right? Like, I'm not an expert here, but there seems to be something that we missed as a district. And that's kind of why we are here right now, and why my head is spinning, where I don't even know where to start.
No, you're right. We definitely heard that loud and clear.
We missed something huge. We need to correct. A survey is not gonna fix it. It's not. It's just not. We have a staff. They're very professional. They need to give us suggestions on how we can fix this without a survey. We have enough information.
That wasn't the purpose of this. The purpose of this was what quantifiable information do we want from kids, staff, and families to benchmark over time? To ask, to have a stakeholder group and say how to fix it, that's not what this is. This is
A metric.
This is a metric. This is how do we quantify a qualifiable experience?
So here's the problem. The original request here was, how do we know if this is successful? Right, this is what
Yes.
I asked for 2 years ago. How do we define the metrics of success for the Princeton plan? And that's what these are supposed to do.
Corey, what's
So-
crazy about
Wait,
this
hold
is,
But it needs to be objective and it needs to be. So
well, why wasn't this given to you 2 years ago? We talked about this in July.
I
Erica asked,
can answer.
no, that's not to you. That's a question for the people that are,
I
part
get
of
it, but
this.
I also feel like, okay, we can ask that question.
but even in July, we
We
asked
haven't.
for it. We were not gonna get this until the end of the year, was the original conversation, and Erica pushed hard to get this before the year turned, and here we are in January getting it, even though we all agreed in like
Which
October
is
to have
great,
this.
so how do we
before the
do
year
on?
ends.
So how
But
do-
there's
how
nothing,
do we
this is
do
what we
this?
measure every year. There's nothing new.
We don't measure any of this.
But This
We
isn't,
don't,
This is new stuff.
this is the new stuff, and it's what you're putting right here, because we're really gonna maybe talk about it later. This stuff on the first couple of pages should have been in all of our hands before this school year started. Corey's been asking for it for 2 years. And frankly, this ship sails really slow, and there's really not a reason for many of these things to be as slow as they are. This should have been in everyone's hands a long time ago, probably when Corey asked for it the first time 2 years ago. There's nothing new here. I mean, I can't believe that this wasn't given to us the week after the meeting after we asked for it.
So
Because we hadn't started the school year. We had.
We
nothing
talked about it in
to
September and October. What, that could have come to the next week. I mean, this is what we capture every year. There's nothing exciting here. There's nothing about Princeton
To
plan.
be able to compare a previous year versus the current year, we would had to at least have been through, when's the last?
But we're not measuring it. You're just giving us the topics.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, shame on everyone for not having this put in our hands before January 4th, 2023.
Measuring it is putting the data in front of you, which we discussed that we can. And that we will. We'll show you data
But you're
over.
giving us on January 4th, the data that you'll be able to present. The point is, this information should have been in front of us. It could have been in front of us way back when Corey asked for it before there was a vote.
The purpose of.
And
this-
now we're gonna do surveys.
The purpose of this was to go through what we currently, what measures or assessments we have on students and the frequency of them. So we can.
To measure the success of the Princeton.
So we, oh, yes,
But there's nothing here about the Princeton plan. This is how we measure the success of students. Always have.
well,
What's
this goes
new?
back to Jen's question. What year, this goes back to Jen's
No, it
question.
doesn't.
Well,
No.
Is this the year are we
No,
comparing?
Joe, I'm
the
sorry. but
future?
No. The question would have been, these are the data points we always collect. When do you want to compare them against what years? That's one set of questions. This presentation is sharing with us what I was expecting was some insight from the professionals who are going to share with us what they think we could add to what we're already doing. There's nothing new here.
Those are the last two slides. What?
But you
other
just said you're
data-
going to leave those here, so that's not even discussed.
We're talking about it. Alexis said that maybe we have survey fatigue and we shouldn't, hire a third party to do it. Corey said it should be, objective. That's the discussion right here. How do we want to
So-
capture these experiences? In addition to data that we have on kids, so that we can give you a picture that says in the fall of 2022, or by, let's say, October 15th. Of 2022, here are our first fall benchmarks. By February, here are our February benchmarks, and in July, here's how students did over the year in these areas. The question is, okay, that tells us students learn. This is about how do people feel about it.
Right.
Am I crazy?
No. The thing, so this is the summary of what's happening here. These metrics are what we're going to be using to evaluate how our students are doing, right? But these are things that we have always collected. So what Jeremy is saying is that this is not Princeton plan, right? This is not changes through the Princeton plan. This is stuff that we collect every year. So for me, I'm sitting here a little bit frustrated, like you, Jeremy, thinking, Lisa, that was awesome. You spoke as, you told us the benefits. I'm thinking, what are we doing that is improving? What is the improvement here? All I'm hearing is, let's just make sure that the kids are surviving and the grades aren't dropping and that they're meeting all of these achievements they always make. I'm looking for, what is Princeton plan bringing to our community? We're not saving money anymore. So
that's why we need
we
this.
keep saying we need a hard sell, right? I'm
Why
sitting
do
here
we
going,
wait for
please
that?
sell me, Lisa. That's a great point. Our special ed department is benefiting. That's a sell. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's gonna measure it by doing X, Y, and Z. I'm struggling here. Jeremy's right. Everything else on here is just things that we measure every year.
Can I just
can't believe we
piggyback
put
on
this
that
together as a
after
professional
going
presentation.
through all of the people who wrote in and tallying the data? The people who were pro Princeton plan spoke a lot about equity. Some of the people on right here spoke about how the Princeton plan was going to give us equity. I want to know how the Princeton plan is going to close racial achievement gaps and how we're going to measure that. I don't see that. So nothing in here And I have loads of notes about how we could improve equity in our schools. I'm looking for some program here. And I don't see it. So that's my problem.
I feel like we missed something, and I'm gonna say that again, because doing this now is. We got 182 parent responses to our strategic plan survey. Which impacts every student in this school. From K through 12, we got, what's 182 responses?
How many kids? 2,000, so less than 10%.
Yeah, so
Well, not really, because some are.
But think about this, we got X amount of responses from people for the Princeton plan, right? We got a certain amount of responses, it's sort of similar, right, percentage wise? What, we're gonna spend all this time doing all these surveys and all these different things. What is the end game? What's the end result? Because we're not gonna get the participation. We're just not, we have not seen it yet. That we get participation in surveys, so that's not the answer, and focus groups. We're never going to get the demographic we need in these focus groups, ever. We're not going to get it. We didn't get it on strategic plan. Which we just didn't get it.
So we should stop trying?
I don't know what the answer is, because I'm not the person that, I don't know what the answer is. It's not my job to know what the answer is. We missed something here, and now we're in a position where we don't have a way through. These metrics are not solving our problem.
The metrics were never to solve a problem. The metrics were to be able to take snapshot, moment in time of student achievement. 3 times a year and at the end of the year.
We always did.
And to say, in this year, first year in Princeton plan, were there gains compared to last year? And use this use the data this year as a baseline for going forward. Question was asked of Lisa and Margaret, what do we expect to be different this year?
Yes.
And in future years because of how we're organized today compared to how we used to be organized? We can share, let's just say that 90% of all of our measurements improve. That's not going to change some of the comments that we heard from families about, not liking it or wanting something different and so on and so forth. That's not going to include students really like it because I don't know why. Or as Margaret and Lisa had said in anecdotal conversations with staff, they feel more together, they feel more focused, they feel so on and so forth. If we don't want to know that information, fine. This will be strictly a set of data that we show based on how kids are performing at different moments in time.
But I think the point is we already do all this, so we can look back. You guys can pull data for us all day about what we've done in the past, how we before COVID, how we look now after COVID. I mean, are we really going to ever get true data because we have these kids that have these large learning gaps to begin with? Because we did this right in basically at a COVID recovery year.
We talked about all of that in the retreat. I feel like we're having our.
But in the retreat, we said we were going to come up with the ways to measure. You guys,
These are the ways that we have.
Why did we even? It should have been presented to us over the summer and asked, "Is there anything you want to see with these?" These weren't. It's January 4th. We're just being given the measuring tools now.
These have always been our measuring tools. We had a conversation in the retreat that we didn't want to create additional assessments and over test kids just to see if our system worked. So this is a walkthrough of all of the assessment protocol that we have by child, by grade level, by ELA and math. And what we don't have is we don't have a way of reliably reporting back to you how kids, how staff, and how parents feel. We have anecdotal information. We had anecdotal information from December 1st forum, from emails.
I guess I kind of wish we had started this, we hit the ground running with this like September, where we were getting feedback and surveys. I feel like we missed.
In our retreat, this should have been given to us.
And we can't go back.
Not a question for board goals for us to determine. The idea was we're going to have the board develop what they want to measure. We didn't develop anything. The same tools we've always used.
So we're at the point where we can't go back. We lost time. What are we going to do going forward?
We don't have all of our measures, Jeremy. We don't. I can't tell you how kids feel in the Princeton plan, and I don't think our counselors or social workers should be the ones going in there and asking them, because what we have heard from families is that kids do what the adult tells them. My child's not being honest because, the teacher is asking a leading question, or of course, they're gonna say what they think their counselor wants to hear. We've heard all of those things. We can give you student achievement data for as many years back and as many years forward. That wasn't the intent of the retreat, and that wasn't the spirit of the conversation we heard a month ago when we heard people volunteer their experience, and it wasn't kids, it was staff through a survey by the union and parents who either sent an email or made it to a meeting. The question is, do we want to have a better attempt, as Erica said, a better mechanism to get that information? Because then what do we do if the kids say, I really, really like it, and parents say they really, really hate it? Who's going to win that battle? Or staff says, oh my God, I really, really like it for all these reasons. And, families say, I don't like the bus ride. That was the spirit of our conversation in the retreat. That was.
So what is the recommendation here? Like I see, I understand, what is the recommendation?
What is our goal?
Right,
What is our
that's-
goal?
that's
Is
exactly
our
it.
goal, okay, is our goal to make what we have today better? Or is our goal just to go back to where we were? What is our goal?
Oh, that's not
Everyone's
where I was
sitting there.
going. I was
I
thinking,
don't understand, because if we want to be a
so
forward
this is not
moving
working,
board,
okay? This
I
is not
agree with
working.
you.
None of
These
this is working.
metrics, these
But you don't know
metrics
that
are
because
the
only you're-
same.
You're not
If you're in
She's living it.
one set of metrics, and I agree with you, we've had all this, right? But this is a cultural change. This is, I want to know is from the teachers, and it's going to take time. Because we've been at grade banding, what have they been able to add to the classrooms? That's the stuff I want you guys to share with us. And I don't know, it's probably not a metrics. It's probably a presentation. It's probably going to take time. So at the end of the day, and a year from now, when we go to have another public forum, it's not people being so upset. And there's things we need to fix about transportation. But it's not going to be a bunch of people up in arms. Like, that's the goal, is not to have a bunch of people up in arms. People being able to share their great experiences and also their negative experiences so we can go fix them. I mean, we keep saying it's about money. Let's move on. It's not about money anymore, right? You know that.
But it's costing us money. It's costing us money. So at this point, we need to make sure that we have a goal here on where we're headed and how much more money are we gonna spend to fix the problems? Because there's no denying, it's not just transportation. There's no denying that. Okay, there are many problems that need to be improved. You may not be able to fix everything for everybody all the time, but there are many things that need to be improved.
So then let's systematically go through what we want to study and then
So the metrics and the issues are different things, and that's what Joe is trying to say. The metrics are what needs to be measured today, tomorrow, and every day forever.
to
As
ensure
educators.
success.
No,
To ensure success
life.
forever.
Correct. No matter what plan you're in.
Yes.
These metrics need to be in
Yes.
place for student success.
So
We're combining two conversations here. We're combining the four major struggles of our community that we've learned from just being humans in the community, as well as all of the things that we posted and asked for and gained insight on. But we're now meshing them. The metrics are important. I agree. They are metrics that we knew long before January 4th. We always do them, and we have to keep doing them to make sure our students are successful. There's two conversations here. We have some serious problems that we need to address.
Yes.
So what is next there? If I had to say what's next there is, how do we fix the problems? And that comes from the professionals in the room, not from us. How do we fix the problems, and what are the costs associated with those problems? And as soon as the board can evaluate that, we determine, okay, this is probably what's right. We should do X, Y, and Z, and it will cost this. Or this can be fixed and there is no cost for that. We need to go there. So the metrics, while I understand that we're somehow meshing these naturally, I fully get it. The metrics are separate from how to we resuscitate these issues. If you read the 82-page document, it outlines these problems, but we're here now and we can't go back. So we really need to look at those problems and decide what the board is willing to fix, how they're going to fix them, and the cost associated. Because I get it's not about money,
But
And
we
now,
now,
again, it's not about these metrics anymore. It's about the problems that we know.
so, right, we know, if we have, we know, if we
Right?
have to
We know.
plan
We
for
just need to-
savings,
we
right?
need to
And I
survey
know,
more to get more.
No, we don't.
We know, I think we know.
Here's
We
what no
have
one
an
ever,
idea what the problem is.
no one ever said,
we know for
this,
sure.
this is the problem that I see, right? Nobody said, what's the best academic elementary structure for kids to thrive? No one asked the question. We got this 82-page report, the least desirable model, and if anyone rereads it and shares their interpretation to be different, was the model we picked. The least desirable model that they provided to us was the every other year loop model. In that 82-page report that's sitting on our website. I'm not going backwards, but in order for us to go forwards, we need to understand what do we want to go forward with? We have a report that was done for us a couple of sessions ago about declining enrollment. Does it make sense to do a community school setup again? Just don't say no yet, just hear me out. A community school setup with some redistricting to capture some of the inequities that we learned about or inequalities that we learned about through this conversation so that we can create a series of solutions that benefit each of the components of our district who have either become disenfranchised or we have learned had been disenfranchised, right? There's two sets of people here, and I don't think that we need to hurt some people in order to help others if there's a more appropriate approach that solves a series of problems while also erasing some newly found challenges that were put upon us. Joe has indicated in the past, there's you know, that we are only here because Indian Point closed. And the only reason that we chose this 3-building model is because we were told that this was the only model that's going to save us money. Every other conversation that people tried to have during the SWOT analysis and everything else was entirely erased. It was suppressed, and you were not even provided the opportunity to discuss what other options made sense. We were promised that $2 million was the only achievable, the only way to achieve $2 million in savings was this particular model. I recognize that we did and I say we because I'm now a member of this existing board and it's a continually running entity that said we don't like the experience that we're going to provide our kids if we go to this 3-building model with this $2 million in savings because it's going to make our class sizes too big. So we gave a gift back to have slightly smaller class sizes than we could be allowed legally or through our contracts or whatever, which gave up some of the savings. Then we had to hire a whole bunch of TAs for a whole multitude of different reasons. And we were told that our busing would be net zero. None of these things came to fruition, right? So we're net spending money. So really what I think we should do is, like in a perfect world for me, we go back to this community school model with the redistricting that we do very simple, small steps. When you do things too big, you create a lot of problems. In most businesses, you make small incremental steps to keep moving forward in terms of achievement. We didn't do that. We put a whole bunch of things together, shook it up and threw it on the table and did a rough sort. That is not a successful approach to any business typically. And we could find small ways to solve the problems that we have uncovered that existed. Again, I'm going to repeat myself, as well as we've created a ton of new problems. We saw a report that housing sales are up, enrollment is down over that time, right? Which indicates that maybe people chose not to come here because this isn't super interesting of a super attractive elementary structure. Those of us who live in the Tri-Village area, the district only ends for us at Blue Mountain. That's it. That's as far as our kids have to go. There is an awful lot of our district that exists beyond that destination. And those kids are on the bus for a really long time. When the board voted, it was 35-minute maximum bus ride. That's not true. We saw that report that's in our inbox today that says it's going to be an hour, right? And we have parents telling us it's an hour for 5- and 6-year-old kids, right? So for me, we should have community schools. We should do some restructuring to make sure that we solve the inequities. And then we should figure out if it makes sense to do two smaller buildings with one bigger building at Frank G. We could then consider a K2 with 3, 4 and putting 5 to the middle school.
Why don't we go back? Why wouldn't we start from where we are and work?
Because every other year loops.
Why would you just?
Every other year loops
go back to where you were? Let's
because
work on
people
the hard
were
work.
because generally people were happy and there's nothing.
Okay, I'm just gonna say this, and I'm gonna say the elephant in the room. There's a wedge in this community. Why is there a wedge? Because you sold them Princeton plan based on cost. Okay, you did. You said doing this exploration of PP because of financial impact of everyone's taxes. We should not be talking about the benefits of PP. That's a quote from someone on the Board of Ed when you voted on. So now we're here. And you're saying to everybody, even if it costs us more money and you're not happy, we're just gonna try to fix what was done. You can't do that. It's not gonna heal the wedge.
Going back is.
I did not say that. I did not say that.
That's what and I'm not
We shouldn't be
disagreeing, there's
here.
not a better option, I'm just saying, let's not go back to go forward, let's do the hard work and go forward.
The only way to move forward, if we've learned nothing through the strategic plan process and the failures that we've gotten to this point, is we didn't engage our community well. And so it took us, how long? 3 years of planning and board votes and discussions, and it wasn't the best plan. But have I learned anything? Yes, I have. And I don't think we can quickly change anything. I don't think we need to flip a switch on anything. I think Jen's right. We need to articulate what are some immediate problems, what are the price tags to fix it, and then we need to engage our community different. Erica, I hear you that we're not doing it well, but I'm not ready to give up on that part of our community that hasn't shown up and spoken out. I think we need to try different consultants. We need to reach the people who aren't speaking out to get their experiences and their feedback, because I agree with Jen, we can't go back.
How would you get there?
Well, unlike most of the people on the board, I'm living this, right? Today, I live it, 2 kids, 2 schools.
I
There's
lived it,
people who
3
have it.
kids, all 3 schools, all three of my kids, we lived it, just because you live it now, I lived it before, we all, anyone has lived it.
You haven't lived, Jen, with the Princeton plans this year, I'm sharing that I'm living, having
You all had
elementary
experience.
age students.
You all had experience.
Yes, and there's challenges that need to be resolved that had not been brought to my attention until this conversation started. But we didn't pick the structure to solve the problems you've raised. The structure was picked to solve financial problems. My point is, if we can do better, let's do better. I mean, the reality is, I will tell you, I beg my wife regularly to pull my kids to go to private school if this doesn't change. I do not want for 1 minute to put my kids in this every other year model that exists. I encourage her to let me pull them and go to private school. Frankly, I don't know if I'm going to win the argument, but it's hard, right? She's super PTA involved. It's exhausting to be in multiple places. She wants to volunteer for picture day. She had to pick which kids she got to go do pictures with, right? That stinks when you have elementary kids. It's different when your kids are a little older, they start to be more independent. The problem is for us, how do we find, and I say us as a board, you're right, we don't need to go backwards. The question is not backwards, but the question is, if it wasn't a financial conversation, would anyone have chosen an every other year loop model that is one of the most undesirable models, and it's really not done by any district in Westchester sans Peekskill in the way that we have it, right? It's the only one. 47 school districts in Westchester County. If this was the best approach to elementary education, why wouldn't they model this in districts that don't have financial challenges? So we accepted that as our explanation that this was our way out of a financial hole. We were misled by some series of consultants. I'm not indicating that anyone in our administration did anything wrong. They interpreted the data that was provided them by other professionals, and they were led to believe that this would create savings, and it didn't. But no one said, pick this model because it's the best experience for families. It's not the one that's going to make our housing values the highest. This is the only one that's going to stop us from taxing people out of their homes, was a quote that we heard. That didn't happen. So why do we want to keep trying to put a Band-Aid on a gun shovel? We shouldn't be in this
But you're
experience.
worried
in the
about
first place.
transitions, but yet you want to flip it back within a year. That's causing another transition.
Well, there's
for your
never
kids.
going to be an end to
Do
transitions.
you want to know what?
Both of my kids transition next
Jen,
year.
I-
It's 50% of all
I have to be honest with you, Jen. I agree with you. It can't go back. But we now have the ability to pick the best educational model for these kids.
But
I don't know what it is.
I'm not, I agree with you, Steph, but I don't think we could just go back to 3 community schools to transition.
I
back
don't know
2
if
years
that's
later. I just think we need to be really,
But you-
we need to slow down and slow down.
But I can tell you as somebody on this board that's talking about taxpayers' dollars, I am never, ever voting for anything that's gonna throw money to fix this. Because it isn't the best educational model. So I am not wasting other people's money to try to keep fixing something that I refuse to do that. We are here and I said, we're supposed to worry about people's taxes and we're supposed to spend their money. If I'm spending other people's money, it's for education and it's to better students and to have better achievement. That's what I'm for. So I don't know what it is, but we do have an opportunity. Like if you had the opportunity and it wasn't cost to go through that study again and pick the best educational model that would be for the kids. I think maybe it would have been different. I don't know if it's near school. I just think that that's where we should be coming at it and not just taking people's money to fix something.
Yes, but it's also not gonna be a quick. It's gotta be a process. We have to evaluate. We can't just pull the plug and make the changes.
Yes, and that's because your kid, and I can sit back and say that too, because my kid's not in elementary school right now. But if I had a kid in elementary school, hearing you say that would infuriate me because I'm living it. So I can say that because it really doesn't impact me. But if you tried to do something at the middle school or the high school, I'd be like, "Ooh, that's my kid."
Well, look what happened when we did block scheduling. It lasted a month because people hated it. Everyone quickly reverted back because it was not successful. And nobody made people just deal with it so we could work it out. They said, this stinks, fix it, and they went back and got rid of it quick. It's easier when you're not living it. Now, when I said I'm living this, I meant this. And Jen, I'm with you, right? We learned there's problems. So how do we fix those problems? But we created a lot of new ones. And I don't know that you need to create new problems to solve old ones. There may be a gentler approach. Almost every person who lives in the house they live in lives there knowing where their kids were going to go to elementary school. There's a very minute number of humans who bought a home that are not in where the kids going to a school that they thought they would go to, right? So if you go back, everyone gets what they already knew they were expecting, but I'm not saying go back like it was. Saying, let's look at it. Let's have our administrators do the hard work to find what's the best approach we can do and then make incremental changes. Because we did this because we thought we were going to be broke and it thankfully isn't the case, right? 3% annual increases for the next decade is a fairly impressive financial forecast for a district that was looking at 14% year-over-year increases for 5 years in a row, right? And that's, a lot to do with Joe raising money through his lobbying efforts, Enrique's budget management skills, all of these things came together. So I know everything I need to know to decide what I would vote for today. I don't want to subject families to doing this again.
How we got here to this conversation was, and I'll use, I guess what Stephanie said, best educational model. Who's determining that? Because if we're gonna ask teachers and kids about their experience this year, they may tell us something that is different than what the parents are going to tell us. And that's part of the wedge, I guess I'll say, in the community as well. We've heard from families who have said, my child is having this experience. And we would have, any number of teachers, parents, or social workers or counselors check in with the child or, do some observations, and they weren't seeing the same thing. So even within families almost, this has become a wedge in terms of, parental experience versus student or staff experience. That I'm coming full circle to what got us back here is to say, what information do we want to know from them to determine what's the best education model to improve this one, to give it time, as I've heard Jen and Ally say, or not ask anyone any questions and go on the information we have and do something different.
I think we need to start with what we have before we go into April trying to hire and fix. We have to look at what we have currently and not drag our feet anymore to attempt to fix some of the problems we are aware of before we go and ask for more problems. We have to ask the community what's working. We need to get more feedback from them. But that doesn't mean we should not wait.
I'm not saying wait either on some, that's what I'm saying, like, what are our immediate problems and charging our administration with.
We have not said that once yet. That hasn't been agreed to once yet.
No, I feel like I suggested that.
I think I misunderstood. I misinterpreted it.
You did.
I think I may have misinterpreted it, because I thought you were saying we need to wait for this.
No,
No, there are.
I don't want to say long-term changes. I don't want to make a hasty change, just to make more changes down the road. For a long-term,
Yeah, no, okay, I got
but
it.
I feel like, yes, there are immediate, we've heard from parents and community members, there are immediate problems.
Yes.
What are possible solutions and what is the cost? Like Alexa said, some of them are gonna be zero cost. If we change how we email parents, that's a zero cost.
Right.
If we need to put more buses or drivers on the street, that's gonna come with a considerable cost. So that's what I would like to see right now, is charging our administrators with what are some of the immediate problems that maybe we could work towards solutions.
Yeah, I think we provided a pretty good list in the last meeting about what we needed to see or what we were suggesting. To move forward with some of the immediate issues, right?
I hate to be a jerk, but does anyone think that we're gonna make sweeping changes in a short period of time from an improvement standpoint? It's January 4th and we're just getting a lot of.
I'm worried about.
I don't, that's why I'm not, Jen, to answer your point. One of the reasons that I'm not comfortable rebuilding is because the way that we move is so inefficient that I don't want to subject my kids to this again. And I don't think we're going to have much change next year that would be incrementally different from a modification of what exists today. I think there's components of this that will never change because we have kindergartners and first graders in classrooms that don't have a bathroom. So you've constantly, what's best practice from a safety standpoint in a classroom today, right? Is that easy to accomplish? Do we need to hire more TAs to open doors because kids have to keep going to the bathroom? They're taking little kids with them. So your kid's losing class time so they can walk their friend to the bathroom because they're using gang bathrooms in first grade versus having, fifth graders have to use the restroom in their classroom with their peers. I mean, there's a lot of challenges here that you can't fix the way that we are built both geographically and from a facility standpoint. So again, to me, it's this gunshot with a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. Why would we want to keep trying to fix some of these things? If we can't close a classroom door and keep it locked because it's too much for the kids who have to go to the bathroom, they're not old enough or strong enough to open and close a door on their own, that's interrupting class. And if my kid has to walk out of class or someone else's kid to walk their friend to the bathroom because they're little and they're using gang bathrooms in a hallway that was built for 9, 10, and 11.
Wait, back up. You lost me.
Facilities issue, but
No, with the doors, what's going on with the doors? What is the problem with the doors? This is the first time.
doors are heavy. Little kids can't open and close them up.
Yeah, but they have to be shut. They're
They're supposed to be closed and locked.
Yes, so are they shut?
Well, I don't know. I'm not in the building, so I can't answer it, but if they are shut,
Well, that is a serious safety.
but if they're shut and locked, how does a little kid go to the bathroom? Before the door's shut and locked, they go to the bathroom in the toilet that's in their classroom. Now they have to leave their classroom
Yes.
and most of them are not able and at 5 years old to open the
But
classroom.
even
door
if
on
they
their
could
own.
open the door, the doors are supposed to be locked. That's the point.
Well, they're leaving their classroom to go to the bathroom because we now have.
Coming
gang
back to
bathrooms.
lock door.
Jeremy's saying it's a time. We're taking time away, but
The door is locked.
I think it's an awful lot of things. I think it's either the door's locked when they get back to their classroom, or we're leaving the classroom door unlocked for them to get in. Or we're hiring a TA to walk kids to the bathroom.
But so you want to change the system back? And then, so while we research what is the best educational model, what if it's changing everything up again? And what if it is the Princeton plan, which is doing it differently?
Can I ask Erica,
I don't think we'd ever do a 2-year loop model again.
Weren't
would-
you wasn't Erica on a committee with a bunch of other parents that never got to present to the board?
we never presented.
I was on that team.
Can you
Jeremy
present?
comment.
Well,
Not right now, it's really late.
well, no, and I don't want it now, but I'm saying I never heard that. The public never heard that. The Board of Ed.
The
never-
SWOT analysis was the answer to that, but we never got to, the group of parents never got to answer in front of the board. We were never able to get on a virtual call to discuss, or we never got to do that.
Well, Why can't we do that?
Well, I think that's what, I think we need to, I think that we need to come up with some kind of ideas. I think that steering committees. We need to do that. I just don't think a survey is the answer. I think we need. to
No,
do a
I don't
little-
think a survey is there.
We need to do, I think we need to do a little bit more and dig a little deeper, and that's not up to us to know what that is, right? So. I'm gonna request that maybe at the next meeting, we have an idea of what next steps look like, right? So. What does this look like? How can we capture? Information, real information from families on how to improve. The current situation, because there's things that you guys can do immediately to fix certain things.
Well, we've heard two things, streamlined communication, transportation. Right, and so I know Enrique has been talking to Liz and trying to figure out, Liz made some bus stop changes or bus route changes. I don't know if she's looking at others, we'll check in with her. Those were the two things I think you discussed last week, right?
Transportation was one. Gosh, I'm sure that would be, I do.
It's also,
Sure, so it's,
there's a whole list.
you have transportation, the family logistics, which is like before and after school, attending events, communications. Financial, which doesn't, lack of community, because the 2 year. Those are the 4 top things.
Financial is huge because the community should definitely know a final number. I mean, I know we've all thrown it around, people have asked me, I don't remember it. But what's the actual cost? That final number needs to be presented.
So while we come back with immediate recommendations around transportation, communication, and logistics. Question is what as a fix. What other information do you want? Or are we in fix it mode? Because I mean, I don't, I think it was you, Erica, said we still want to hear from families. What's, is it working? Do we like it? Do we not?
I think we need to hear from families. I think we need to hear from families about what is working. I think we don't really know that, right? Like that's what we're missing, right? I mean, what are you're concerned we're missing a big demographic of people.
Yeah, just by the very nature of that, at that forum, there was only,
We got a lot of email.
Yeah, we got a lot of communication from people of varying degrees of different locations, different parts of our community, people who were very,
I would disagree with that, but.
Yeah, I disagree with that too.
No, we have so many emails of people that really
We
love
have.
the idea of Princeton plan and not being segregated by your neighborhood.
I've talked with people in the community that felt uncomfortable sharing their name and their information,
Totally.
their opinion
Over email.
over email or in this forum because they feel, to your point, Stephanie, there's a big wedge in the community and a lot of them feel intimidated.
So what?
I think that's on both sides of the.
Yeah, it is.
That's on
It is.
both sides of the aisle.
What
I
is the
think that's
communication?
one.
How do you reach those people? A third party?
I don't know the answer
Right.
to that. I can tell you that we have not reached everybody. I can't tell you if there's a solo.
I don't think that anyone here thinks we've reached everybody.
No,
I think we're all in agreement.
But I think that's our problem with every.
Yeah, it's with
I
everyone.
think that's a problem in public schools.
And just to Joe's comment before, my understanding is we're already in fix-it mode. We better be in fix-it mode, right? It's not that we're going into fix-it mode. We've been in fix-it mode. And the question is how much have we fixed and how much do we still need to fix? So we shouldn't be out of fix-it mode at any point until we know what the path forward is.
It also has to be quantifiable in numbers, right?
Well, that's part of the metric. Like, we know that transportation is an issue. There are logistics issues for parents. One of the things that no one's floated is, what if we change start times at the school? Would that alleviate some of the parents' logistics issues? Maybe that's one option. Start the high school later. Because some kids are saying, well, I can't get my kids on the bus because I have to be at work and it's too late, or it's too early for me and I need them to start later, the younger ones, because we haven't looked at different ways of addressing the immediate issues so that we can at least get the quality of life back for the parents and for the students, because the transportation is just not important. I mean, it's better from what it sounds like. I don't hear as much noise around.
I don't know.
I'm not saying it's great. I'm saying it's better than it was.
She changed the middle school bus routes.
No, I'm talking about elementary. Would it
People
be-
just voice their concerns. They're not still bitching because we're
I don't know what
waiting
we've
for us to
changed
make a
on-
decision.
I don't know
Is-
what
is-
we've changed. Nothing.
I don't know, have we not gotten better at the transportation?
My son's bus takes 35
Dude,
minutes to
December.
get a half a mile.
Okay.
He doesn't ride it.
So, when I had my kids in school, they would ride over a half hour to take the bus, and I had 3 different kids in 3 different schools for a number of years. It was tough. We had to manage.
I could walk there.
I-
It doesn't make sense.
I get it, and we used to drive our kids.
Three kids in 3 schools is high school and middle school that are independent. We're talking about little kids who don't take care of themselves yet being in different schools.
I've had kids in the districts. and-
Yeah, but I'm saying, but they weren't you weren't in 3 elementary schools, so it's not the same thing. In fairness, right? 3 kids, having a senior in high school and a 5th grader is not the same
They're
thing
independent.
as having a kindergartner and a 2nd grader in two different buildings, right? Or having your not being able to do after-school academy in Furnace Woods because pickup's the same time as your bus drop off from Frank G. No, I'm just saying, it's not the same as your high school kid who is able to take care of themselves as a young adult. It's a huge difference.
Right, so every family's different, and every family has different, they might have 1 kid, they might have multiple kids, they might be close in years, they might be different years. We can't accommodate everybody. That's why redistricting doesn't work, because that's a temporary fix. Right, that's gonna be a very temporary fix, that as you start to get, people moving through the community, that will change, the demographic will change of where the families are and where the kids sit. So redistricting doesn't answer anything. That's one of the things that I think we should take off the table, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. Right, so-
Yeah, I don't know if we should even get into solving anything right now. I think maybe next meeting we can come back together with steps on how to improve, number 1, transportation, or after school, before school, whatever, right? Like, we could sit here and problem solve forever, but to be honest with you, I don't think me or you can solve these problems. So. Yeah,
Right,
I hear what
the
you're
point
saying.
is, we should be in fix-it mode. Right?
Yes, we-
Regardless-
In the second quarter,
regardless-
we've got a lot of school year ahead of us.
We should be in fix-it mode. I'm hoping that things are getting better. I haven't seen as much noise in the emails, which says to me either things are getting better or parents are just giving up on communicating with us.
Well, I
I
think
don't know what.
No, I think we asked for the information,
I think
we petitioned them for feedback.
Mhm.
So now we have the feedback,
another
and
way.
now they're waiting for us to do something with that.
Okay,
So that's why I think it's quieted down. We got an email today.
so my question would be, can we get a presentation in the next meeting of what we've done to try to improve it? And what we plan to do to try to improve it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
I just want to give 2 comments. Comment number 1 is, we met with regarding transportation. Please, Anthony and I met with several drivers. We sent information to Alexis. Probably she will share it.
No, I did. Yeah.
If anyone read what the driver said, that's going to be a long-term problem. A problem that we will never be able to fix. That's my first comment. So transportation, we might be able to fix how many millions the kids are, but not the key problem. That you don't have older and younger kids, that the younger kids look up to the elders and the elders keep the peace. That's gone. The second one is just at a very macro level. England made a decision that a new prime minister that was going to change everything. The market did not agree. Within 2 weeks, she was gone, and they went back to the way it was with changes. My whole point on this is not because I made a mistake in voting yes and the Princeton plan or I like it, that doesn't mean that we cannot go back because it doesn't work. In that particular case, the market said, we don't like what you did. The market here is a community. And the little feedback that I get from when I go to talk to Hispanic people that feel comfortable talking to me because I speak Spanish, they like the way it was because they all feel comfortable having their kids together. When you go to another country, and your daughter is in Portugal or was in Portugal, I can bet you any amount because it happened the same to my son, that most of her friends are Americans. My son goes to Portugal and hangs out with a girlfriend from Greenwich.
Yeah, that's actually not what happened. That's okay. She might have met one or two Americans.
But that's how it is. I mean, I would say that I've been here 30 years, but for my first 10 years, all my friends were, most of my friends were Spanish speaking.
But you need to branch out more, Enrique.
That's what I'm saying. In my first 10 years, I branched out. You're my friend.
There you go.
Yes,
Although I have a Hispanic background.
yeah, but you don't speak Spanish.
What he's saying,
Okay, then that's it. You see why we get along because of that.
So,
No, but I'm serious, you know, when you go to a country where people speak a different language with everything, you try to stay with the ones that you feel more comfortable, and language is the most important part.
I just want to agree with you, Enrique. I think that your ENL kids would feel more comfortable. I mean, I'm just.
But we don't know. And that's going back.
we're making assumptions without objective.
Yeah, and to educate and having kids in my class that feel more comfortable when the class has a majority of the same type of student in it. So I agree.
I mean, it's human nature, that you feel more comfortable with your cohort. That's all.
A little bit different when there's a language
I will
barrier.
leave
though.
the next presentation for the
But
next,
that's part of your.
whatever you want. It's kind of close.
There's no actionable items, so it's an overview,
Okay,
so it's not an action, right? There's no.
as long as the next, if we do it on the 18th, right?
I'll do two.
Yeah.
I was going to do, it was going to be athletics, Tommy Baker is having a problem, so he's not coming. So it's going to be Lisa
you and I,
and me. And me, 10 minutes.
Ricky and I can do it in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
We have this timer thing between us.
So everyone, is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Everybody's on the 18th.
Yeah, there's no voting on it. There's no vote on minutes.
Right, nothing else. The only, I feel it's disrespectful to Enrique.
I never,
It's okay.
it was his idea,
Have this
though.
thing where we time each other and have a.
Enrique, would anything change? I mean, any new data from this? So what I'm trying to say to the public is this presentation will essentially be the same. Anything that would change would be any revenue information.
If anything changes here, it will be a couple of slides and I'll update them.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we're still in a range mode, so I think it's fine.
Okay, so then we'll push that over onto the 18th.
The only thing is, the department pick them up because we'll use them again
Yeah, we'll save them.
or save them.
We can save them. I
So
can
we
save
have
them.
to-
I'll save
It's
them.
actually best.
Okay, who do you?
Great.
Please, everyone, control for it. It was a long night. We started talking about.
Is that okay? Here, come to me, I'll take it. Please, like, hurry.
Right, and it's all here, over here, somewhere. Please, I get them.
Okay, so do. Anyone drop up? Do we have anybody signed up for audience comments on agenda items? Come on up.
We're actually gonna flip the order. We're gonna shake it up right now. I'm gonna go first. Go, with permission, right?
Super.
Thank you.
We have 2 minutes and 59 seconds.
Listen, I will keep it quick. For his sakes, I have 2 kids at Blue Mountain Middle School. I'm just going to piggyback off of the very long conversations about how to engage your community. Perhaps start with the basics, fix transportation. I know that some changes have happened in the last 2 days. It's January 4th. I raised this issue first on September 21st. So I'm again going to ask, can Liz come to the next meeting, or I know this agenda is packed, but and tell us what changes have been made. Great that you guys have that data. I'm getting 1,000 questions from parents. What bus changes have been made? I'm also getting parent community feedback that the bus changes, the route changes were met with confusion and little to no communication to students aside from announcements made during the school hours, I guess over the PA system, which are apparently hard to hear. Many students who had changes made to their buses that they were taking home did not know and got on the wrong bus. This is basic. I misunderstood, I guess, that parents who were impacted or families impacted would get an email letting people know that, okay, your kid is getting off on at this time or getting on this bus in the morning and this bus in the afternoon. I don't know if that happened, but can we just get a little insight? Because if you put that out there and put the effort towards fixing this basic, there's a whole lot of bigger issues, but that is going to start to engage your community. I know that the team is working on it, but communication needs to happen here. People are confused. And a kid getting off of a bus 30 minutes after the time she was scheduled without parents knowing that, not ideal. Kind of takes away from the whole, fact of trying to improve things. Not a great experience for the child or the family, waiting for that kid to get off the bus. Thank you. No problem.
I'll be really quick. So I wasn't gonna speak tonight, but I really wanted to touch on the response that I got from the middle school teachers this morning during that strategic planning meeting this morning. It's my first time sitting in on a meeting. It was actually really great. The middle school teachers are really excited about the kids coming up through Princeton. They're foreseeing the transition to middle school, which is hard to begin with, actually going much smoother. So, and that was some positive feedback. I also saw the same light that you mentioned.
It's different, wasn't it?
The entire staff, everybody, elementary, middle school, high school in that room, they just had a different air to them. And I'm hoping that I'm going to transition into morale, right? So hoping that that starts to trickle down, because morale in the district, and it was during even just the Princeton plan conversations. There's a huge, it's not even, there's a river. It's not a wedge. It's not a stream. There's a river. We are a community divided. Not a single Spanish translated survey was submitted. That's alarming, considering our Hispanic population makes up a good percentage of our school district.
Yeah.
We are not doing a good job at engaging our community. The lack of parents filling out the surveys for the strategic planning is only foretelling of what would happen if we sent out Princeton plan surveys. So I don't think it could be a survey, and I don't think we should just give up. I think we need to figure out a better way to reach people, whether it's small groups, engage. And I don't think it's PTA, because unfortunately PTA has this negative, oh, I don't want to do the PTA. I don't know what it is, and it's not my job to know what it is. But there's got to be a better way to reach people. And we keep talking about we have to fix the problems. I don't think we're really acknowledging what all the problems truly are. I think we need to be humble pie, say, yeah, we have these problems. This is what's going on. We just need to fix it. things are not getting better. You know, you talk to parents in the community, hey, why didn't you do the pillar meetings, or why didn't you want to do this? Like, I had a great time this morning, I got free food, hey, why wouldn't I want to go? It is such a bad word, like to even like suggest to people, and I don't understand why, and I don't know how we're gonna fix it.
Thank you both for hanging in here with us this late night. All right. Is there any additional committee reports, new business, comments?
No committee reports?
Yeah.
From me, right? We've had a meeting right before, right?
Yeah.
But I do have something I was supposed to mention last week. It's a positive. Louis Lanza is a guy that owns some local restaurants. It's the Hudson Hospitality Group. He owns like Fin and Brew, which is above Spins and Spins, Rocco's and Taco Dive Bar. So he's doing a program through Westchester Community College that's finally been opened up for our kids. So it was a program he started in Peekskill. I forget the head count, 10 or 15 kids. And there was an opportunity to bring some of those open positions to us. So Christina Fiel and Deb Cardenas in the high school are working to fill up to 4 slots that were allotted for us as an extension to what had been provided to Peekskill previously, which is really exciting. It's a culinary arts program through Westchester Community College. It's supported through Louis Family Foundation, I think it's the, oh God, that's terrible. I don't remember.
Yeah.
The Lanza Family Foundation. And that is going to create an additional opportunity for the kids that are in the program. And it's for kids wanting to do culinary arts. This is for kids who think there's an opportunity to become chefs and sous chefs and all these things. It'll also be a work opportunity. So the kids that are in the program are going to have a chance to work for his restaurants, both during the year on the weekends and then again in the summer as summer jobs. And then to go a step further, it was finalized about a month ago. He established a scholarship fund with Westchester Community College, $10,000 or $15,000, I forget. It's not per kid, it's a pool, but any kid who's in this program or student or child that's in this program is going to have the opportunity that if they decide to apply to Westchester Community College for a culinary arts program, they'll have access to the scholarship pool as well to help offset or defray some of the cost of their education in the program. So I was excited that we had a chance. It was, again, a program that he set up for Peekskill, and he was kind enough to open the door and work with us and provide the opportunity for our kids. So I wanted to share that. I thought it was a really nice positive.
Very nice.
Thank you. Anybody else? I think, no, going once, going twice. Can I have a motion to close the meeting?